Hey guys, somehow I've got this set to spot focus rather than autofocus, so bear with me just one moment. Let me put it in the short break screen so people coming in don't. Let's see, that ought to work. So, all right, sorry. All right. Sorry, unexpected hiccup. Before we get started, I've got some unboxings to do. If I can do this without giving away my address. So let me start with this smaller, heavier one from Mercury. Unboxing videos, I'm told, are very popular. I should do unboxing videos. I did a short today. I don't do a lot of shorts. They've not done very well for me on the channel. I'm hoping today's with a little more pizzazz will do better. By the way, I see a lot of machetes and big Bowie knives and everything being used out there. I know it's Bowie. It's more fun to say Bowie. Boys in space. Always lots of cardboard from Mercury. Ooh, now that's some iron. This thing's going to weigh more than the amp it's going into. So see, unboxing videos. Just watch those views pile in, right? Very exciting stuff. Anyway, among the many reasons I don't use a huge knife for this kind of thing, it's nice to be able to control the depth of the blade for things like this. So you only cut through what you want to cut through. And I mean, I've got serious knives. Ha 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 ha. Ho ho ho. This Marshall's coming back to life now. I put this to new paint smell. British Racing Gray. All right, now for the smaller box from Mr. Keith Williams, upstate New York. Trying to do this left-handed doesn't work, but I don't want to turn around and give everyone our addresses. And I will take a sip of coffee and try not to slurp on you guys. I do love coffee. So the first thing up top, I'm going to kind of hide for just a second. All righty. So to go with the HX Stomp, I got me one of them there Tonex pedals. And I've played around with it a little bit as far as the software version and the free presets that they give you with the software version go. I've not tried what comes with the whole thing. But I'm also in a position with all the amplifiers that come through here to capture them. So I've got a 58 bassman right there. I've got a 65 deluxe reverb right there. With the owner's permission, if I make a capture that I can use for my own purposes, not sell them, and certainly I will give them to the owners who want to use them. And if the owners want to sell them, we'll talk about that because there's stuff on my end and all. But, I think it'd be fun in the future if I want to play into a deluxe reverb on the channel. I'll be playing potentially into that deluxe reverb, mic'd, with that original speaker, mic'd with the Royer, even if it's going through software. We'll see how this goes. All right, let's see. A lot of stuff here. I'm going to save one thing for later in the chat, but I do want to mention that I have a client dropping off an amp today, and I don't know whether he's going to come during this window, so I've got to leave my phone on in case he calls. I've got the ringer volume down, so hopefully you guys won't be subjected to a lot of stuff, and anyone else, hopefully it'll ignore, or I can turn it off quickly. But unlike, usually I have the phone off for these things. Anyway, let's get to some of the questions and stuff. Let's see, I already got Natas. Let's see. Hey, Kimball, I don't have experience with any of the new Tone Kings other than the Sky King, which I'm not a huge fan of. The Fuchs stuff is great across the board, though I've not tried all his models. He has like 8 variations of everything, but and he does really good work. Hey, Dustin. Hey, Federico. Yeah, I have got experience with Divided by 13s. I'm not a big fan of their build. They have the output tubes physically too close to each other. They build up a lot of heat. They use a lot of cloth-covered wire for things that get very hot, and they have the amp models that I've had in, the bias pot is a regular pot, just kind of silicone to a board. It's not the way I like to have a pot that does critical high, potentially high current, not high current, and not even high voltage, but it's critical that be good. And I don't like any concept of that thing flopping around when it could be chassis mounted or a pot more suited to the task. They sound really good when they're working, just when they do fail, they tend to fail in fiery death kinds of ways. Natas, I put a recommendation from my buddy Lane Sparber up. He's in Queens. Check the top of the chat. You should be able to get his IG thing there. Matt on the Water, I will get to you. I've not had a chance to catch up with email, but you will. I probably could play parts of Liberty Bell on the guitar, but it's tough to do all the counterpoint stuff. The Sousa stuff really was designed for a lot of different voices, and I am not a fingerstyle expert. It'd be interesting to hear like Tim Lurch do something along those lines. Tim Lurch, if you're watching this, please work up Sousa's Liberty Bell for all of us. That'd be a great pairing of things. What is my opinion on Goodmans from England? The speakers, the early 60s, but with massive frames. I've had some good ones. I've had some bad ones. I've had stuff in between. Overall, I see why the companies moved to Celestion, because a lot of the Goodmans I have tried were not that great, but they have some good ones. Good evening, Lyle. Why are new amps being built with rectifier valves? Well, good evening, Martin. They're being built with rectifier valves because players expect certain kinds of amps to have rectifiers, valve rectifiers, and they expect that that's a feature that they would benefit from, and they ascribe certain qualities to the sound. And the thing that they can see that's different about this amp than this amp is the rectifier. This one's got a valve. This one's solid state. So they ascribe all kinds of magic to a valve rectification circuit that you can actually replicate very, very well with solid state stuff if you do the voltage drop and the sag that a resistor, 2 resistors on the HT side of things can give you. So there's not really a need for valve or tube rectification. It certainly gives another added expense, an added point of failure, and you've got to use a power transformer with another high current 5-volt winding just for that. So it's a lot to give a fairly marginal return. Back in the day, valve rectifiers were used in all kinds of things. So you could get them literally at the 5 and dime down the street at the drugstore, in your case at the chemist's probably. or I think you've got buttons, or is that only Australia? Anyway, because diodes were very expensive and very, very primitive, but now diodes are cheap as chips, cheaper than chips if you're talking ICs, and they're reliable. So same with chokes. Chokes were common and cheap. High wattage resistors were very rare and expensive back in the day, and now the reverse is true. But people, I get emails all the time. I've got an AC15 Custom Classic. Can you install a valve rectifier? No. And a choke could, but it won't give you any benefit except give me $150. That, if you want to give me $150, you can just give me $150. You don't have to have me cut up your amp for that. It won't change the sound. Not in any appreciable way. Let's see, Stephen George. I understand that on Fender tube amps that the normal, and I'm looking to see if that got finished up. I will look for the second part of your question or comment, Stephen. Hey, Robbie F. Hey, Alan Harvey from IKEA Land. Getting a C1 with greenback, 2014. As long as it's a custom, not the custom classic, you should be good. They're more than decent. Hey, Michael Fioca. I have not tried the current. Actually, no, I have. I don't remember if it was the 59 or the 87 hand wired. And I don't know if it's a newer version than the one I had, but I had one come in a year or two ago. Brand new. Looked beautiful. Bad power transformer from the factory. Bad power transformer. So I talked to the owner and I said, well, we can get you a replacement transformer from Marshall, but it's going to be another Taiwanese or Vietnamese or whatever made to poor spec, or we can bump you up to a better one. We bumped him up to a better one. He wanted to have a really great amp. I think we used a Haybor in that one. But, Mercury Haybor back in the day, classic tone, even a Hammond is a better quality transformer than what Marshall's using these days, even in the very expensive hand-wired. Seritone would be your alternative, but the Marshall is less in Germany. Seritone has its own pros and cons. I'd say that for the money, though, you're going to get a better version of a Marshall from Seritone than you would from Marshall, and that's sad to say that. But you might also look at Germino and at Fuchs, and of course at Friedman, because those guys are all making better amps than Marshall, and I think better than Seritone. But nothing's wrong with Seritone. There are just some things that aren't as right as with the other amps. Hey, Brian, do I have a favorite transformer manufacturer? In general, if it's on the market already, I will go with the Haybor, which is sold by Mojitone, because that's going to be the lowest cost. But for things like that transformer right here, which is a power transformer for a Marshall 1962 Bluesbreaker reissue, where they use the size of this transformer is smaller than the traditional J245 power transformer in terms of where it goes to the chassis. So this is the only game on the market. Mercury's got that. Mercury's got like 10 different power transformers and 7 different output transformers for a J245, and the same thing goes for AC30s and all kinds of things. You can get, hey, I want the one that they were using in 58, not the one they started using in 60. And so it gets esoteric. Now, I get discounts on Mercury. My mother's texting me about the dog. I'll get back to her. I love my mother, but it can wait. So if I do go with Mercury, the client doesn't pay the high price that you see retail on Mercury's website. But in general, if it's a Tweed Deluxe, if it's if I need a power transformer for a Pro Reverb, if Haybor is in stock, and during the COVID thing, Haybor wasn't always in stock, but if they're in stock, I'll go with that. There's no problem at all with that. And in a pinch, I have no problem using most of the Hammond stuff. Hey, Bambule, AB165. All right, I just did an AB165 / AA864 hybrid, and for that part of the circuit, I didn't have time to do the video on that, but I've done this on so many things. I do the 27K, but I make that first stage 10 microfarad or 22 microfarad. 10 microfarad is theoretically a little bit better as far as overdrive characteristics, but 22 is fine. You may or may not hear any difference. If you already have all the caps in stock and they're all 22s, that's fine. But if you need to order for that, go ahead and order a 10 instead of the 8. Hey, Surge98. Yeah, Scumbacks are good. They are a higher price point. And most of the players in Memphis are dealing with Fender-style open-back combos. So a lot of the speakers that you see me use on the channel are more towards that end of the spectrum. If I had a client with a 4x12 who is chasing specific sounds, then I would certainly steer them towards Scumbag being a great option. But for the open-back stuff, I find that Celestion and WGS and Eminence primarily, and Weber cover the gamut of Fender-ish amps pretty well, and Vox-ish amps. But if I had clients with a lot of 4x12s, I'd be dealing with the Scumbags. The issue is most of the guys who have 4x12s, they just drop off the head, so I never even hear their speakers. I've got my cab to test it with. But I'd love to have a straight 4x12 loaded with some Scumbags, but I don't have the room for it. Let's see, Buddy with an H. He's got a Grom LJ2 Hi-Fi with what he thinks is a bad output transformer. Wildly differential, unloaded 6v6 plate voltages. And DCR. Am I right to assume nothing special about that? I don't know that model, but if it's a pair of 6v6s, anything pretty much close to deluxe reverb should do it. You know, you can measure if you have really crazy differences in the DCR, like I had that on that 36 Gibson EH150, where one side measured like 47 ohms, the other one was like 28K, and the side with 28K, that was a partially open winding. So if you're like measuring 47 ohms and 60 ohms, it may be fine, just maybe an uneven wound. One of them's the outer wind or whatever, and transformers aren't always wound in any kind of balanced fashion. But if it's, you know, off by a magnitude of more than 10, as in was in my case, certainly change it out, and probably a 5E3 would do fine, or depending on the output level of the amp, a deluxe reverb transformer. Hey, thank you, David Pekarsky. Have I seen and would I recommend the new Z-Max impedance matching amp switcher from Fryette? Thank you for the Saturday chats. Well, thank you for joining me, David. I have not seen, and I know nothing about the impedance matching amp switcher from Stephen, but if Stephen's putting his name on it and he knows all the things that can and often do go wrong with cab switching and impedance matching and all that, I don't think he's going to put anything on the market that's going to blow up that has his name on it. So I would imagine it's a great product. Stephen does good work. He knows all the math. He's done the math. It's going to be, if you need something to do that, that's the thing that will do that. And there you go. But I've not looked into it, and I don't keep up with everything that comes out on the market. It's too many things. Usually it's just YouTube. Every YouTube channel is telling me about this new cheap thing on the same day, or this new guitar that comes out. I'm so tired of the embargoes being lifted, and then it's like Acoustasonic Week, or day, or hour. You guys know the drill by now. There is his question. Hey, Stephen, I understand that on Fender reverb tube amps that the normal and vibrato inputs are out of phase, so jumping inputs works lousy. Is there a workaround? Well, they don't work lousy, but they don't work the way you expect. They are out of phase. So there will be a lot of common mode cancellation, but not all the frequencies that you can dial in will be the same. And you can do weird things like having the vibrato on one channel, but obviously not on the other. And so the phase pulses with the vibrato. So it's not lousy or useless. It's just It's an unusual flavor that you may or may not find useful. So play around with it. As far as a workaround, yeah, you could mod it, or if you really need to do it, you get a good ABY switcher with a polarity switch. The radial one makes a good one, and then you can go amp A, input A and input B, and input B just flip the polarity, then they'll be in phase. So there's your workaround. But there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just unusual. How can someone contact me for service work? Travis Rogers. Well, I am extraordinarily backed up, and it's hard to keep up with email, but info@psionicaudio.com is the way to get me. I'm actually going to, when I find the time, I'm going to set up a web form. So all service requests will come through that. And so I will have a standardized kind of flow of people wanting that, because I've got so much spam on, half of what comes in every day, of hundreds of things that come in every day, is junk, and people wanting me to sell you things from Temu or talk about VPNs and all this nonsense, and it's just hard to keep up. I need 3 more me's. Let's see. Complimentary speaker to pair with an Alnico Blue and a 2x12. Any good experiences to share? Hey, Brooks, thank you. 2x12, if one's an Alnico Blue, if you can get the Alnico Silver, that's a great pairing. And Weber does that as the Blue Dog and the Silver Bell. G12H30 is usually also a very good choice, and some people like a good old greenback. I cannot tell you which you will like. Any of those 3 options would be good starting points. Greenback and blue, silver and blue, or blue and the what did I just say? Silver, G12H30. Those are all good things. You can play around the 55 hertz or the 75 hertz. So I think the 75 hertz will probably pair better with the blue. And the thing you want to watch is efficiency. The blue is a very efficient speaker. If you pair that with a speaker that's less efficient, it's kind of skewed towards the blue. Hey, the governor, I cannot tell you what the typical lifespan of ECC 83 from various decades versus current production is, because every one of them is a crapshoot. You can have one from the 60s that's still going strong, but most of the ones from the 60s and 70s are not going strong, and those that are still working at all tend to be microphonic or noisy. Sometimes you get one that's just a gem. Hold on to it, and it may last another 50 years. It may last another 50 minutes. There's just no way of knowing. And I've had current production tubes last for decades, and I've had current production tubes last for seconds. I prefer the former, but there's just no way of knowing. Does driving your amp harder shorten the lifespan? Not on a ECC 83, a 12X7, unless you're over or under heating it. It's not going to be affected. I think it's going to be fine. Thanks, Count Domingo. Appreciate that. A customer is going to use an attenuator on it with a 60s Vox AC30, Neil Stephenson said. They recently acquired. Is this okay and safe for such a vintage combo? It depends on the attenuator. I would not use a Weber. I would not use a Marshall. I would not use a Rockman. There's a lot of cheap ones I would not use. That said, I know a lot of guys have done that for decades with like a THD hot plate without any problems. But with the THD hot plate, you're only going to get about possibly 12 dB, 8 dB more typically before there's a weird coloration. So I would look into what Sir's got and Fryette have got, the current stuff. You really want to have a high quality thing that's not going to be affected. That's not going to fail, because then you could damage a very valuable amp. But I know lots and lots of guys have just gone around the world multiple times with an old JMI and a THD hot plate or 3. Ice Cyprium. You're into the Fender 2 series of amps. PR2, Champ 2, and the Basement 20, they speak to you. Thoughts in general, or even on reliability mods? I'm not a big fan of a lot of the construction methods that Fender was using at that time, or the gray cardboard boards. Lots of spaghetti wiring in that era. All that said, if it's working, that's great. But I'm not a fan of some of the voicing choices either. Service can be a little bit tricky on those because they have a lot of flux everywhere, and you kind of a spidery construction method. It's not really unreliable amps. They're just you could see that Fender was really cutting corners at the time. But, if you're happy with it, that's all that matters. I have no thoughts on headstrong amps other than players tend to really like them. I have not seen any of them. I've not seen or played one in person, and I've not seen inside one. So until I know how it's built, I cannot recommend them. But I can say that an awful lot of really good players like the sound, so look into them. But until I get my hands inside one, I can't tell you that it's something I can recommend. Not that I am the end-all, be-all, but I'm in a position of relative prominence within this field, and so I have, with great relative something comes great relative responsibility. So I find that when I recommend something or recommend against something, I have to be very careful about that. Good evening from Jordan. Hey, Adam Stencil. How would I describe the sound difference between cathode followers and plate-fed tone stacks at the end of mid to high gain preamps? Opinions, pros, and cons. Well, you will always have a more efficient. What's the best way to put this? A cathode follower is a very efficient load. The tube drives it very easily, and the cathode follower stage itself is technically unity gain. So all the tone shaping is done prior to that, and the cathode follower just says, okay, now you have a low impedance out, so it's going to have more gain, potentially have more gain at the end of that tone stack than at the end of a plate-driven one, because a plate-driven tone stack, it's a much bigger load on the plate. The tube is not going to be as efficient throughout the entire range. You're going to have a weaker signal as a result if you compare it to a cathode follower. That said, you can shape the plate stage to distort in certain ways at certain frequencies if you want. It is possible to make a great sounding amp with either topology. Often a plate-driven tone stack in an amp like that, is a choice so that they don't have to go to using another triode. But we're out of triodes. We can't do the cathode follower, so we'll do the plate. And it is possible to use a MOSFET. Let me close this so I don't keep looking at that screen. I need to learn to look at the lens to look at you guys. You can use a MOSFET as a cathode follower hung off a plate, so you can convert a plate-driven circuit to a cathode follower-driven circuit and play around with it. But there's so many other places in the amp where you can change the voice and change the feel and the drive that it's not always worth worrying about. If you like the sound of an amp, it almost doesn't matter. That means that the designer did their work, so you don't have to second guess it. And there are amps where it just sounds terrible, and sometimes it's because they use an AC coupled cathode follower, like in the Marshall Class 5, and you change that out to be something else, and all of a sudden it wakes up. But you don't have to know why that sounded bad. If you've ever played a stock Class 5, you're like, something's not there. Something's off about that. That'd be a good time to do a segue to a little section that I hope I don't have to do too often. I'm calling this Troll of the Week. And now, don't everyone start trying to be a troll on my channel to get funny, to get whatever notoriety this segment will give. Because I can tell when someone is genuinely stupid versus when someone's trying to fake it for a laugh. So this is on the video I did a year ago or more on the Origin 20. It doesn't sound very good. And you don't see me in the video, just the amp and the guitar. Wow. I'm not going to say the person's name because I'm embarrassed for them. Wow. I didn't know you're such a friggin' expert when it comes to amplifiers. Next time, show your face, so if I see you down the street, I'll know who to punch. Everyone's a friggin' expert. Well, troll of the week, I am actually not a friggin' expert. I am a fucking expert on amplifiers, and if you paid attention, and if you could read, and you had any concept of context, you just want to reach out and then you just let it all go. Because they have to live inside that head, and I don't. Everyone's a friggin' expert. Let's see. And here's my face if anyone wants to come punch it. There's a really long line at this point. Let's see. I'm in a dilemma between an AC10 C1 and AC4 WH1. Which one do I think you should choose? They're both the same price, and you live in Turkey. Marash. Don't get either. They're not going to last. They're really built poorly. Especially if you're in Turkey. I don't know what the service situation might be. They're very unreliable amps. I would legitimately recommend like a Boss Katana 50 Mark II over either of those. I don't know what your used market is like, et cetera, but those are amps I would not recommend to anyone because they have very known and predictable points of failure. They were designed to be as cheap, as in shoddy, as in poor quality to make as possible. It is very much the MBA's approach to building devices, and it hurts me that so many companies are penalizing the lowest end of the market for not having enough money to buy something high quality. Back in the day, you could go buy a Fender Champ, which was the student model. It was the cheap version, not the high quality one. And, those things were great. They were inexpensive. They were simple. There's very little to go wrong with them. And they're still around today. And now so many companies are like, oh, this is going to be for the entry market. It almost doesn't matter. It only needs to last long enough because in 2 years when it dies, they're going to want to, if they're still playing guitar, they're going to want to buy our next thing up because our branding is going to make them see the next thing up as the best thing. And I hate that aspect of this industry, but I would not get either of those Voxes. The AC15 C1 is an infinitely better amp than either of the 10 or the 4. You might want to see if there's any possibility of finding a used AC15 C1. I know you can get them sometimes for $350, $400 American, but I don't know what it's like in Turkey. Sorry. JD's Associates. I get asked about Ingle all the time. I need to get a sign and to put it up here. It just says, we don't get a lot of Ingles here. I've not had an Ingle on the bench, but my tech friends in Europe don't have anything nice to say about Ingles, and they see them an awful lot. But that is not my direct experience with them because I have no direct experience with them. Hey, Sebastian. John Sir uses a PEC mil-spec pots in his Plexi. Is it worth it for a high-quality amp like John's SL series? Do I think it's overkill? I think it's overkill, and I have done that in amps that I've built. Now, I'm not criticizing John for doing that, but it is a big cost increase. I don't think I have not found any corresponding increase in quality or the taper or longevity. In fact, I stopped using PEC pots myself because occasionally they become dirty and it's really difficult to open them up to clean them. It's possible, but it's difficult. In theory, they're sealed and should never need cleaning. But I have direct experience with them actually needing cleaning versus an Alpha or Burns or CTS where you open it up and you give it a squirt of cleaner when necessary, and then it's done. And if that pot does fail, it's a $2 to $5 pot versus a $15 pot. But I also know that John's going to be buying these things in much larger quantities than you or I would be, so I'm sure his price per comes way down. They're very nice pots, and I do like them very much. I just think that they're overkill for most purposes. Okay, so Adams has got shorter primaries on yeah. Sadly, yeah, I've never liked the looks of stereotone transformers. I have not myself had experience with them failing, but they just look like when that amp goes, that's going to be what it is, which is a shame because I say 90% of a stereotone, if you get the one that they build, really good parts, assembled really well, really nice wiring. The transformers, I can live with plastic, the bad plastic jacks, and on the IEC connector. I can live with even a cheap plastic fuse holder, but the transformers, man, especially since to change out that transformer, you got to take so much out because they're all kind of layered on top of each other. Oh, hi, Mark. Hey, Stephen George. Yeah, you'll see me put shielded cables instead of inside fenders a lot. It's not always necessary, but it often is. And the other thing about it is, I'm talking about on vintage fenders. I'm not talking about if you were to build one, but on vintage fenders, a lot of times the old cloth-covered wire has absorbed so much dirt and funk over the decades that it becomes kind of rigid and becomes microphonic. So it's not even about a noise thing. It's about that wire. If you breathe in the room where the amp is, you hear it coming through the amp. So I will remove that wire and put in high-quality shielded stuff. Yeah, I mean, if Sir, it feels weird talking about him like this. If John's putting PECs in his amps, they're there for a reason. But I have not found that they offer enough of a benefit other than they look fantastic. And it's nice to say, hey, we're using, on paper at least, the best of the best. But, I've also had Germinos come in with CTS that have been absolutely fantastic. And I've built amps myself with alphas, and I've built with all these things. And alphas have their benefits as well. I wish CTS would fix their audio taper pots on the 500K and the 1 meg so they don't cut off below 9 o'clock. And I found the reason for that is because they're using the same wafer for the push-pull switched version of that pot, or actually the one that switches off, as they are for regulars. And so there's just nothing there below like 9:30, 8 o'clock. And so it's not a bug, it's a feature that none of us want. But if they were to fix that, I would use CTS pots and everything because it's nice to be able to solder to them. I do use the Mojotone branded, Mojotone spec CTS pots and guitars, and I love them. Have I talked about my oscilloscope? I have. It's not that much to talk about. It's a Rigel, and I can't remember the model number because it's DZ and a bunch of numbers. It's in the description of the videos. There are two kinds of techs in the world. Three kinds of techs in the world. There are those who, if you ask them about their scope, they mumble something because they don't have one and they don't know how to use it. If you ask them about their scope, they say, yeah, I've got it. It's a necessary thing I've got to have, but it's just a thing. And there are those who will sit down and tell you all about their scope collection, about their grandfather's scope, and what they can do with the scopes that no one will ever care about. I'm in category B on that. So, I mean, I have a scope and I use a scope. I think about that scope as much as I think about a utility knife. It's a tool that I need to have, but I haven't bonded with it. If you're going to do that, make sure it's closed. Let's see. Hit the wrong button. Yeah, let's see. I have not crapped on your weird amp choices, Ace. I just don't think that the 2 era Fender is nearly as good as the 1 era. You missed 21 minutes watching the Let's Make a video. Well, that's not wasted. That's not a wasted 21 minutes. In fact, you've got 4 minutes left. You need to go back and finish that video before you're allowed back in here. Doug Romero, did they change the ET65 speaker? Not as far as I know. I get them in all the time, and they tend to sound just like my old one. No, my old one sounds a little bit better than a new one because my old one has been played in now for like 4 years. But the new ones, they sound like it. Now, cabs affect how a speaker sounds. So you can put a great speaker in a bad cab or just the wrong cab and not get the results you're looking for. But I've had I've not observed any differences in ET65s. Hey, Matt Fields. Hey, Lou. What is my choice of 12-inch speaker for a Fender Deluxe Reverb amp? Hey, Stephen. See my buddy Zach Child's Ask Zach's video earlier this week on that subject, and he asked a lot of his player friends who are all Nashville greats. And I was particularly pleased because all those great guitarists agree with me. The aforementioned WGS ET65 is what was one of the most commonly recommended from all those great players. So is the the Vintage 30. I was thinking Veteran 30 because WGS, and the Eminence Alessandro GA or GM, whatever it is, his version of an old Jensen. And the two that I recommend for people are either the ET65, or I like the Warehouse G12C, which is very similar to the Alessandro. They're both chasing the Jensen C12N thing with a little more scoop than the ET65 and a little more extended highs than the ET65. Both of them with very similar, very nice low end. And you can hear a lot of the channels, a lot of the videos on my channel with that ET65 with the Deluxes. But check out Ask Zach's channel and his video from the other day for even more opinions on that, most of which are great because most of them align with my own. Are the Vishay BC 500 volt ceramic discs? They're okay. Here's the issue. My recommended caps weren't available with your supplier. Most amp suppliers, and I think you're talking about CE distribution, amplified, what do they call it? Antiqueelectronics.com. That's the consumer individual version of CE distribution. A lot of those companies don't sell the good stuff. They sell the cheap little 500 volt ceramics, kind of generic. They're okay in a pinch. I wouldn't use them. I think an old or even a new Princeton Reaper build deserves better. I'd rather use film caps than cheap ceramics in the tremolo circuit. You can get a 22 and 2 10s or two 22s and a 10 for about $6-7 if you go film. But for ceramics, you want to go to Mauser or DigiKey. And I've got a video on this. I think it's called Boring. The first one's called Boring, and the other one's called Even More Boring, about how I source and order parts. So yeah, look up those videos. But it's the issue with going with the Mauser, other than that it's a little bit hard to navigate, and I show how to navigate in there, is that, all right, at the end of it you need 3 or 4 ceramic caps. They're 34 cents each, but then they've got a fixed minimum shipping charge of like $8-9. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for individuals to buy $1 worth of caps and then pay $8-9 to have it shipped to you. From my perspective, when I'm ordering 1,000 of this value resistor, 200 of this thing, 50 of this thing, $8-9 shipping, that's great because it's a flat rate. So it all balances out. But if you can't get the ceramics I recommended for a tremolo circuit, go with the films. You can get 3 Mallory's in there or whatever film cap. 630 volts is what I'd recommend. Thinking about running an attenuator in your Garnet. Any pitfalls I should be wary of when shopping? Yeah, I don't keep up with attenuators. I'm looking into reactive loads, which is separate. Some of which also overlap with attenuation. So look and see what Sir's got. I know Sir's got the reactive stuff. Look at what Fryette's got. See what Friedman's got. But I just don't keep up with the attenuator market. I can tell you what has failed for clients, because that's what I find out. Someone says, hey, this caught on fire. I was using it with X. Don't get the Weber. Don't get the Marshall. Don't get the old Schultz thing. Those fail. Is it a company you've heard of? Is the price too good to be true? So let's see. Hey, Michael Murray, that's most likely to be electrolytic caps. That's the symptom. Depends on where it is in the circuit, but polytone, most likely electrolytic caps, especially since in a solid state thing, electrolytic caps are used to decouple stages from each other instead of film caps. So one of those starts to leak or act up, you get DC where it should not be. So. Yeah, keyboard cowboys. Hey, David Hudson. Hope you're okay. I lived in Atlanta for 2 years back in the day, and it's been, it's not like, oh, I don't care about Florida, but the pictures from Atlanta, but I mean, it's the whole thing with the hurricane and all the damage and loss has been terrible. But you kind of expect that on the coast of Florida. To see that kind of destruction in Atlanta, sea-based destruction in Atlanta, that's a lot. Oh, I know he wasn't worth my time, Ricky. I don't care about that. I get trolls all the time. I'll let it go or I'll delete it if they're rude about other commenters or if they're rude about people who play on the videos. But if someone's just total ass, I'll kick him out off the channel entirely. I don't have any concept. I don't know anything about Legendary Tones Hot Mod or Mr. Scary Mod. I don't keep up with other people's mods or something like the name Mr. Scary. I mean, if you bring me a Marshall JCM800 and you say I want it to sound like a Dokken record, first of all, you got to pay me extra because I got to listen to a Dokken record. But at that point, I'll say, okay. Well, I can make the amp do what the amp in this sound was doing, but then you need to go back in time and be recorded in LA, and that's half of what you're hearing there is is outboard gear that they use or AMS plate or whatever. So I have not looked into those mods in particular. I would not be interested in it. I'd try not to ever take a job where I'm trying to make someone's player A's amp sound like player B. Just tell me what you're trying to get out of it yourself, and I can help you, or I can say that's the wrong amp. You need to get something else instead. Let's see. Oh, the car Mercuries are great, Ricky. I like the Sir Ombre. I like the cars. I think the cars use a ridiculous amount of excess silicon, but or is it silicone? One's anyway. Two, but I think they're a bit silly, and I don't like the reverb driver cathode on cars. But the cars are really well built amps. Cars, Top Hat, Sir, Friedman. There's a lot of good amps out there. Well, randomly selected user, I like overkill too if there's a direct benefit to that overkill. Sometimes it's kind of bragging rights. And if bragging rights float your boat, go ahead. PEC will give you bragging rights. Thank you, Thomas A. Carlos, the super sticker pair character flying the air with a red cape and a smile on his face. I don't actually see the super sticker image in this. I get a description of it. Why is my autofocus off? What did it grab instead? Sometimes it'll grab something circular in the background and get thrown off. It went back to freaking spot focus. I don't need this out of you today, camera. You've been eye tracking me for like a year now without any problems. I'll deal with this later. It seems to be good enough. It's not like I'm the best looking guy on YouTube anyway. I'm the third best looking guy on YouTube. I've got a plaque that says that. I can't find it. Yeah, and thank you, CK1. I appreciate that. One of the things it likes to do, this iPhone charger, it'll grab that as an eye. The Hacko sponge thing, it'll see that as an eye. Anyway, someday I'll have everything working perfectly at the same time. The issues from last week are not this week's issues. And now all of a sudden I'm having autofocus things, and it's got to be some buried menu thing. Maybe I'll look for it during the next break, which is not there yet. Hey, Thomas, when it comes to reconing a speaker, how do I know if the paper or cone is of high quality or similar to original? I don't, but that's why I go with the best guy for the job. I take it to David Halford, and he is so critically involved in every aspect of his work. He's not going to use a cone that he's not happy with. So you find someone who does superlative work and you trust them, and that way I don't have to learn everything about speakers because David already has. All I need to know is that every time I get a speaker back from him, it's been fantastic. So I'm not a speaker expert, but I know which one to hire. I have, if I have experience with the Epiphone EA26 RVT, I don't recall it. I have a hard time remembering all these amp model numbers. If it was called a name, I can remember things. But when it's just a random string of numbers, sometimes it floats around. I don't have if it says Epiphone, it's not worth putting any money into unless it's like from the 1950s or earlier. Sorry. Have I tried vintage inspired pots? Yeah, I use vintage taper pots in guitars all the time. I've not tried the was it Ventone? There was some company that right before COVID looked like they're going to be the best ever, and then COVID happened and they couldn't get them made. And also before COVID, I quite liked the ones that RS Guitar Works was having made up for them, and now they're only selling them in wiring harnesses. They're not selling them individually. So the Mojotone vintage tapers have been really, really good in every guitar I put them in, and they're what, $7, $8 versus $15. So that's nice. Thank you very much, Strumbum. I don't think my videos are the best on YouTube, but I want them to be among the very least offensive. I want them to be at least never objectionable. I want them to be so good that you don't think about it, which means I've got to think about it a lot. Thank you very much. I am planning on offering merchandise. I need to talk to some vendors, and I've been talking to Keith about this, about getting samples. I just don't want to sell a T-shirt to you guys and have it be some thin thing that you can see through, or it tears if you touch it with your fingernail, or it shrinks 4 sizes. So I want to have inexpensive merchandise that's actually worth the money that it costs. So I've got to do some research on that. Hey, Ted C. I'll be getting some amps out there. It's just been a crazy period of time. COVID really sank that project. Now I need to get reloaded. All you need is cash, and that's what I'm not having. This thing is really liking my microphone today. Yeah. Let's see. Hey, Matthias Rosenqvist from Sweden. Okay, you got a 2-note torpedo reload, reactive load attenuator. I'm glad randomly selected unit. I have seen some extensive testing of the torpedo as a reactive load and its frequency response, and as a reactive load, its frequency response leaves a lot to be desired. But maybe as an attenuator, it's good. But I have no experience with it. Captain Fineweather, is an ESR of roughly 10 ohms a probable value? I don't know. I've got charts for that. I don't know that stuff. Some stuff I learn and I know it. And some stuff I just see again and again and again to the point where I know it. Stuff like this, I've got charts for it. I have to go and say, all right, this is the capacitance, this is the voltage, what is the range? I don't know. And you can Google that as faster than I can at the moment. Sorry, I don't mean to be mean, but there's stuff that I know, and there's stuff I know how to look up, and that's in the I know how to look it up stuff. Hey, Matthias, I tried to answer I answered your question on the same amp last week, and I guess you weren't here for the answer. Is yours the anniversary model which has reverb? If yours is the model which has reverb, just the top boost channel, no normal channel, no tremolo, just top boost channel with reverb, have a tech disconnect the reverb from the treble pot and disconnect the reverb return, and your hum will go away and your amp will sound a million times better. It's a terrible implementation of reverb in that amp. If it's not, and with any AC30, if you have hum, the first suspect, besides filter caps, are the power tubes. If they're not matched, you will have noise in the output because you won't have common mode cancellation. But specifically for the older hand-wired anniversary models, an older one, the one that had reverb added, the reverb was a bad mistake. Oh, you don't have reverb on it. Okay, well, I don't know which model you have because they keep coming up with different anniversary models, and it's hard for me to keep track of it. If it has a high hum, most likely it's going to be output tubes, followed by filter caps, followed by loose hardware / screws. Special Made in England doesn't narrow it down. So many different companies in England had the brand for so long. I don't mean to. I'm not being dismissive. It's just anniversary model. I can't remember which anniversary model is which. They've had like 20 different anniversary models, and every company that gets the Vox brand rights comes up with a new celebratory. This time we got it, and it never quite is. We're going to take our first 7-minute intermission, and when I come back, I'm going to see if I can find that magic setting that's messing up my autofocus today. And so we will resume in 7 minutes. Thank you. All right, I figured out the eye focus thing, and it's a limitation of the camera. I was trying something to see if there'd be a quality difference. I'm limited to streaming right now at HD 1024 because if I go to 4K for the streaming, there's a crazy lag. It's like 30 seconds added. I'm already about 20 seconds between like that, about 20 seconds or more between when I say something and you hear it. In this case, it was longer, which is problematic. And if I go to HD mode, it's even longer. So on my on my camera, I had it set to 4K, even though I was streaming to you guys at HD. And apparently at 30 frames per second, which makes the stream look better, at HD mode, this does eye tracking, but in 4K mode, it does not. So I had to switch the camera from 4K to HD, and now my eye and face recognition is working and everything's groovy. I don't know why the lag is so extreme, but it also explains why it takes so much time for you guys to reply to questions I ask. One day we're going to get all this technology to the point where not only can I stream to you guys across the world, but if you want to reply to something I say, it can happen within a second or two or less. We're not quite all of us alive, sadly. Hey, randomly selected user says 10 ohms VSR is really high. I believe you, but I don't remember those charts. Hey, Gringo Pig. In my experience, the issue with Weber attenuators has to do with the very, very cheap components inside and terrible thermal management. So just no. Stephen George, that's very kind of you to say. It's ironic. I don't know if irony is the right way to put this. I think Alanis has kind of ruined that word for us. But I get so many criticisms on the videos when I play. People say I can't even play my way out of a wet paper bag. I guess because I don't play Eruption. Thank you very much. I don't think that I am currently a good guitar player. I used to be a good guitar player. And if I wasn't fixing amps all the time and making videos all the time, I'd probably have time to practice. I remember being a good guitar player. But then I got the pros to come over and play. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that puts. I remember where I am in these things. I used to be in bands a long time ago. Fortunately, a long time before there was phone recordings, so no videos of me playing on stage on YouTube. If someone said, "Hey, we got a covers band and we're going to do Stones and Beatles and REM and stuff like that," I'd say, well, give me a sample set list and I'll be ready in 2 weeks. That's where I'm at. I would need to sit down for 2 weeks and play through things quite a bit to just, I don't know, shake off the rust. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. When am I start making amps again so I can buy one? Well, I've got a deluxe reverb kind of thing coming up that's going to be available for sale, and I'm trying to get the faceplate situation sorted out on the Excalibur. So hopefully in the future, not too distant. And Mark Spurgeon, you love the Troll of the Week segment. That was, you may not be watching the video live. You might be behind everyone else. I'm not sure. On the screen, it should say live. If it's on a phone, it'll typically be in white with a white dot. And if you click, it'll say like behind X minutes. And if you click on the red or a live button, it'll catch up. I've seen that happen on these things before. People are replying sometimes an hour to things that happened an hour before. So, hey, Terrence Smith, I am well. Hope you are as well. Your Cerebella combo volume pot has static noise as you rotate it back and forth. What should you do? The first thing you need to do is try a different 12AX7 for whatever tube/triode that volume pot is feeding. I don't have the topology of the Bella in my head. If you're to call Sir, though, they'd say try swapping V1 or try swapping V2, it is not uncommon for a 12X7 to develop a leak such that they have positive DC on their grid, in which case you'll hear that on the volume pot. It's also possible you have a dirty volume pot, but that's probably a relatively new amp. It's much more likely to be a 12X7. You can just take the, if you have two 12X7s towards the beginning of the preamp section and swap them, odds are you'll have a different issue somewhere else in the circuit, but your volume scratchiness will go away. And that means that the triode that you moved, the one that used to be in the first position, was the culprit. There's not a lot that's going to go wrong with the Cerebella, but tubes go wrong. There's nothing that Sir or any manufacturer can do to control that. Here's a good one. Sirloin McGroin. Does noise floor priority overcome tone priority, or is it a compromise? That is a false dichotomy. I see all the times on the forums and in the magazines, even very respected magazines, that the certain amount of noise or hiss or static is the price you pay for vintage tone, which is utter complete nonsense. Those amps, if you get a 1965 Deluxe Reverb like that one right there, 1965, that was not a noisy amp, and there's no reason for that amp to be noisy in 2024. It'll still be as toneful as it was in 1965, potentially more so as the speaker will be broken in. Noise, static, hum, hiss, all these things are actually negatively affecting the tone, which is a terrible word that we all throw around all the time, myself included. It gets in between. That gets in the way of what you're actually trying to achieve. Best way to put it: in America, we have 60 hertz power. In Europe and the UK, it's 50 hertz. Other parts of the world vary. 60 hertz. Let's focus on the 60 hertz that we have in America. That's right between a B and a B flat. And if any of that goes into the rest of your circuit as hum, or higher multiples of that, say 120, 240, etc., get into the amp as buzz or hum, that's always being amplified. And it's always between a B and a B flat. And it will throw everything that you're playing off, because you're going to have frequencies beating against each other. Not just if you play a B or B flat, but you play an E. Well, all right, you don't quite have a fifth. You don't quite have a flat fifth, but it's just E. And all these things waste energy. They rob low end. They rob clarity. They kill note separation, and they can even kill sustain. So you get rid of all the noise issues, and you get the amp working as designed. And all of a sudden, wow, it is so, I didn't even know it was on until I played. And the notes just drip out of this, and there's harmonics, and I can hear every note in this complex chord, and listen to that low end, and it doesn't fart out anywhere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, I think people come to my channel expecting me to show circuit tricks like, hey, here's how you do this diode clipping thing, or here's how we're going to change this gain structure to make it. And they're probably disappointed to see that a lot of what I do is, all right, let's clean this, and we need to clean this a third time and measure for stray DC and just get all the noise out. I mean, I'm a very persnickety janitor as much as I'm electronics anything. And I don't see any dividing line between, cleanliness is next to toneliness. Let me flip this out of the way so I can look at the lens again. These things matter, and it's real easy to sell a mod or to do a demo of a mod, a little sketch of a mod in Guitar Player or Premier Guitar, and have everyone go out there and put a cocteau in their guitar. It's a lot different to say, hey, it's really important that all your pots are clean and that your lead dress, moving that one wire 1/8 of an inch can make all the difference. It doesn't sell magazines back in the day when there were magazines to be sold. So, it's a lot of mythology out there about vintage amps being noisy. Let's just put it that way. And remember that most of the great records that we all love with all those vintage guitars and vintage amps. We're not done with vintage guitars and vintage amps. If you go back and listen to Hendrix in 1968, he was using a 68 Marshall with a 67 Strat. And probably was going to smash that guitar at the end of the gig, so it didn't make it past 68. But the brand new guitar into a brand new amp. No experience with JMF Spectras, Wayne Millette, sorry. Matthias, I am sorry about the about not being more specific with your AC30 hand-wired reissues. It's tricky knowing all these things. Very dainty 2XX. Seems like I need to sell tents. I say that I wear a double XL. I used to be a large. At the start of this channel, I was a large. It's very frustrating to me that at the start of this channel, when no one ever saw what I looked like or anything, just my hands, I was 50 pounds thinner. And now that I'm on video all the time, I'm looking my worst. Never have gallbladder issues if you can help it. And I had one other thing that I don't really want to talk about, but really took me off my feet for about a year, and it's hard to get back to the gym. Let's see. I've seen the Jack White Pano Verb thing. I would want to know how it's built before I even think about anything positive about it. Given Fender's track record, I can't imagine it's been fantastic. And God, it's ugly with all that yellow. It's just hideous from a design perspective. But as far as the sound goes, I've heard one demo. I watched Leon Todd's video on it. I don't like the same thing happened when the embargo lifted. All the videos came out on the same day, and everyone magically has this amp. I watched Leon Todd's video on it because I'm like, all right, people are going to ask me about this amp. Let's see what it sounds like, and I'll at least give Leon a view out of it because I like Leon a lot. Great channel, Leon Todd. If you don't know his stuff, but he does gear reviews. I love him despite that. He sounded like he was playing an old Fender amp with a lot of reverb and tremolo, and then kind of a harmonic tremolo thing. It sounded kind of interesting, kind of a two-trick pony. I don't expect it to be very well built, let alone for the $3,000 price that it's going to sell for. But I could be wrong. It could be the best thing they've ever made. Could be. We'll find out. It's definitely one of the ugliest things they've ever made. Have the best amps been built? No. Some have, but it is very possible to make a brand new amp that sounds better than anything ever made before. It's just the real issue is it going to be the best sounding version of something you've already heard before? The best Fender, the best Marshall, the best Vox, etc. Or is it going to be something innovative and new, because the market will not reward the innovative and the new. It just won't. People have tried that. People have lost small fortunes trying to change the way people hear guitar. Basically, there are 5 or 6 amp sounds that people want to hear, and they want an amp that gets them. I guess the most recent addition to that would be like the Dumble Overdrive Special, and all the Dumble Overdrive Special is a tweaked version of a Fender 60s Bassman. I know that's going to shock people, and it's a good implementation of that concept. But if you come up with something really innovative and say, hey, this has got a active parametric 2 EQ, and it's got the world's best effects loop, and this thing, you can flip this switch and have absolutely no distortion whatsoever up to 100 watts. People are like, nah, it doesn't sound like my old Fender. Guitarists are extremely conservative. Meanwhile, bassists are always looking for the shiniest, newest thing. And it's interesting to me how wildly divergent the bass and guitar worlds are. Let's see. Tonecraft Audio is a jewel wrench I was talking about in my videos. Thanks, Doug Romero. Yeah, I'm glad to know someone else is making that. So Tonecraft, what he's talking about is when you see me remove the pilot light the lamp holder from a Fender. I've got a special wrench I got from Mission Audio that fits in that little space where most wrenches dare not, fear to tread. But Mission Audio went out of business, so I'm glad that Tonecraft has got that. P.S. You're thinking of me. Well, thank you, Martin. I would love to be building amps, and I will at some point. Thanks, Bert Rodriguez. Appreciate that. Dumb question, but I don't know how to wire an L-shaped switchcraft switch. Has 5 tabs. Damn, I'm dumb. One of them is ground. So find the one which is ground. That's the one that will meter continuity to the shell and the body of it. So there's your ground. Then you have 2 prongs per side. One prong is going to so let's look at it as a left pair and a right pair, or a pair 1, pair 2. With a switch in one position, pair 1 closes. With a switch in the other position, pair 2 closes. Switch in the other position, both pairs close. And it's the middle position on the switch, both pairs will close. And you can see the contacts being made. So you find the orientation, the inner pair typically, like the inner of the 2 pairs like this, you actually wire those together, and that's where you do your output to your output jack. And then the other 2, which get switched, are going from the outputs of your volume pots. So if you're on the bridge, it's like this. If you're on the neck, it's like this. Both, it's like this. And that's how it works. So the trick is you find that inner pair. So typically the first one's going to be the ground, and the next one is the pair that you want to wire together, and that becomes your common feeding to the output jack. Hopefully that makes sense. It's easier with the diagram. I've become a worse player since I've started making YouTube videos, Captain Grumpus, because I don't have time to play as much. I used to play acoustic guitar many hours a week, and I would play every Thursday night for about 4 hours with my friends. And that, if you play acoustic all that time, you pick up an electric, it's all like, but, and during COVID, during the lockdown, I was playing a lot of acoustic because I had no work and had, if you're, potentially considering getting a job restocking grocery stores at 2 o'clock in the morning just to have some income because you're not sure if there's going to be any amps coming in ever again during lockdown. I had a lot of time to consider my choices in life, and I've played a lot of acoustic then. And right now I don't have time. I'm just so rusty. Well, Matambale, there's more to it than that. It's not just showing you stuff in 4K versus HD or 720. Is if I upload a video with audio, if I want to have a recording of an amp, if I upload that at 720, YouTube uses one algorithm to compress the audio, in which case it's not going to sound very good for you guys. If I do it at HD, 1024, it's going to use a different algorithm. It's going to compress it a little bit less, but still quite a bit. It's not really going to sound like what I recorded. If I record and upload at 4K, it uses the least compression, and what you hear on your end is going to be much closer to if you were to hear the wave file that I actually record. So the best way for me to let you hear what, say, that those 2 amps sound like in a video is to upload at 4K. In order to do that, I have to do the video at 4K so that YouTube uses the algorithm which ruins the audio the least. And so that's the impetus behind it. It's not so you can, see my pores or anything. I have to watch that, as a matter of fact. But, I was seeing what it would look like today if I streamed at 4K, and then the program I use for streaming said, well, if you can do that, but you're going to have a real big lag between what you say and when people hear it. It's already pretty extreme. So I didn't do that, but I was like, okay, let's let the because I've got a 4K capture card. Let me send from the camera at 4K for the 4K capture, and then downsample to HD for the stream. I wanted to see if there'd be an visual quality difference and audio quality difference when I watch it back compared to last week's. I did not realize that if I set my camera to stream at 30 frames per second at 4K, that I would lose the eye face autofocus. I will be getting a new camera within the next 6 months, not a replacement, but to augment this, and that's going to be a 10-bit camera versus this 8-bit camera. And the new Sony 10 bits, the next level up from this little thing here, will let me stream 4K 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second if I want via USB instead of using the HDMI capture card. So all these things are in the future, but for now, for streaming, I am limited to HD. Thank you, Goody Guitars. Appreciate that. Very kind of you. Character doing a shaka sign with his hands, saying cool. Cool. Do I like turret boards better than eyelet boards, Doug Romero asks, and do I know where to get a Princeton and Deluxe Reverb turret board at? I think CE Distribution might offer an off-the-shelf turret board for those. I don't have a preference for turret versus eyelet. Just a second. Sorry. Change of the year. My preference for one over the other is that if I'm doing an eyelet board, if I'm doing a fiberglass board, so no fiberboard layer, no stack beneath it, solder can drip through those eyelets. And so that's a concern. And I can use that. I can work with that. I can work around that. But my preference would be to use turret for that kind of thing, because then I don't have to deal about things dripping through the holes. But I'm going to be doing a lot. Going forward with my own stuff, I'll probably start to incorporate PCB more and more as the prices and production is getting easier for that. But, turret is really pretty. But I would, if I were in the average builder's shoes and I had to choose between this turret board and this eyelet board, and everything else was the same, it'd be a coin toss. Now, I'm talking about on a fiberglass board. If you're talking about a fiberboard thing, eyelet's much better for fiberboard, obviously, because it weighs less and there's less mechanical issues. Emmett Otter's doing docking stuff with GarageBand. Well, that's exactly what GarageBand amps sound like, which is why I don't use them. Hey, Gary D. Guitar. He's got a Marshall DSL 20 combo. He noticed when it's on the overdrive channel, the speaker will thud loudly and visibly flexes hard as he plays, even at whisper sounds. What could be causing this? You have got subsonic frequencies or subsonic oscillation. Something's going on that's below your hearing range, but the speaker's trying to let that out. Take your amp to a tech. Something's really wrong. That should not be happening. And I'm not being glib about this. I'm not a big fan of the DSL 20. I think the DSL 40C and CR are quite good for the price, but the 20, they cut some corners I don't think should have been cut. I just want if that were my amp, I would want to know what was going on, and if it's below the frequency range of what you can hear, but the speaker's still trying, odds are it's something kind of drastic, and so you need to have a tech look through that with a scope. It could be something very simple, but I can't tell you what it is from here. Hey, Hacksaw owner. Capitalization is so important. Silvertone 1484 replaced output transformer, rebuilt the power supply and output section, also possibly mistaken, converted the heater supply to DC with a simple bridge, rectifier, and caps. It's quieter. Am I damaging it? I don't know whether you're damaging it. On paper, nothing that you are talking about would have damaged it if it was done correctly. Let's go out on a limb and assume that you did everything correctly. No, none of that will damage that amp. The thing you need to look at with the 1484 is the bias supply, which often cannot get cold enough, negative enough to really make a 1484 perform correctly with modern wall voltages. So sometimes you need to do a slight doubling of that. And, as long as you're only converting the heater supply for the preamp, if you're including the output section in that heater supply, you want to branch out a little bit because that's a lot of current to ask of any little circuit that you can drop into there. Why do so many artists stack Marshalls but not deluxe reverbs? I don't understand, because a 100-watt Marshall is quite a loud amp. Do you mean in terms of using more than one at a time? Most artists don't use more than one Marshall 100-watt at a time. Guys will have stages with that. One of them's typically real, the other might be a spare that's on but in standby, or a lot of times you'll have like the wall of amps. It's all dummy heads with dummy panels and lights. You don't want to stack deluxe reverbs because the bottom is wider than the top and they'll wobble and they'll fall off. Sergeant Grinch, I would love to sell you one day, someday, hopefully not too far. Yeah, had a home theater receiver with a motorized volume control. Made noise when you used it. You move the wire, noise goes away. A lot of that stuff. I'm not going to talk about Malmsteen because then I might have to hear one of his songs. Thank you for putting the link there to that wrench, Matt Fields. I might have to get myself a second one. Thank you for getting one for Tanner there. Thank you, Martin Reed, on the like and subscribe. Yeah, I'm supposed to click this thing. I always forget. I'm a terrible evangelist for myself. Thank you, sent to me. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Could I quickly go over taking the screen resistors off the board and on V7 and V8 tubes on the Fender Deluxe Reverb reissue? Jumpers on the board okay. Gotcha. All right. Here's how I do it on a Fender reissue. Let's take a Deluxe Reverb as an example. If you have a twin, you just do this 2 more times. So all the screen resistors, 4 with the twin, 2 with the Deluxe Reverb, are on one side. There's a common trace. That's the screen supply. That's shared with one of the pins, which goes to the choke, and another one goes off to the screen supply of the filter caps. So 2 to 4 resistors on one side, they're all joined together. On the other side, they have individual orange wires going to the output sockets. What I do is I remove the resistors from the board, and then I snip the orange wires. Sometimes I'll desolder them, but you can just snip them off top, and I desolder and remove them from pins 4, upside down my head, pins 4 on the tubes. So pin 4 on the tube used to have an orange wire connecting it to its individual location on the board. Then I will run new orange wire from the screen connection, the common screen connection under the board, and I'll usually do that to the one of the solder joints that ties to a quick connect for either the choke or the little quick connect tab that goes to the filter caps. So on the bottom of the board, I'll add more solder or remove the lead-free and added leaded solder to that quick connect or that post connection. And that's where I run that orange wire. And it doesn't have to be too strong, because once the amp is together, it's not going to have any stress on it. Just leave a little bit of slack. And run that to pin 4, upside down my head, pin 6 of one of the octal sockets. And then I run an additional orange wire from pin 4 to, pin 6 to pin 6 super twin rather, and then to pin 6 and then pin 6, just like you would find in an old Fender. And then I, from 6 to 4 on each octal, that's what I'll install on a Fender a 3-watt 470 ohm resistor. So the only difference between the reissue and say a 65 is that I have the screen wire going to the common screen mode on the board rather than individual resistors on the board, which can get hot. Hopefully that makes sense. See ya, Andy, 1966. Yeah, Matt Fields just said the entire thing I said much faster because I was trying to give demonstrations and then realized there was nothing here with which to demonstrate. Is there an actual reason beyond aesthetics for having amp upside down with all the heat issues? Yeah. You don't have to bend over on stage as much to turn a knob. You get to a certain point and that'll be important to you. Plus it looks cool to have the knobs up top sometimes. Wow, we are almost caught up with the chat today. That never happens. That's strange. You guys are either being very patient or I have pissed off people and they have not come. I got a Princeton reverb reissue, but changed to a 12-inch. Okay, deluxe reverb output transformer, a grid stopper on the phase inverter, 40 microfarad first filter cap, and a Stokes mod. Should I have just got a deluxe reverb where I personally stop with? Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you still not a deluxe reverb, and even with a 12-inch, it's not going to sound like a deluxe reverb. The cab dimensions are too small. I would not have done the speaker or the output transformer. The output transformer is not going to give you any benefit, really, in that case. But if you're happy with it, you're happy with it. I would have done my equivalent to the Stokes mod and the grid stopper on the phase inverter, and recap probably with 40 microfarad as well. But I would have done that on the second stage, not the first. I would have done that on the screen node, but I would not have changed out the output transformer or gone to a 12-inch speaker. But I'm persnickety, and that gets into the subjective. It's not like my subjective is better than your subjective. It totally is. My subjective's awesome. I have no opinion on Synergy preamp modules because I have not tried the Synergy system, but I know the guys who make various Synergy things, Dave Friedman, Bruce Egnator, and they're really good stuff. And they make good toys. They're good toy makers, so I expect the Synergy stuff is great. I just haven't tried that system. Hey, Tones McBones, any advice on how to cut a steel chassis or tooling? I have a Bluesbreaker issue and love to rotate the power transformer, but need to reshape the chassis cutout. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt. When I do it, and I don't like doing it, I take the chassis and take it outside, and I put it up on a sheet of plywood held up by some sturdy sawhorses. And I take a black Sharpie and I mark the line that I want to be there. I want to be the new hole dimensions. And I use a Dremel with cutting discs at high speed. I start at low speed to score the line, then I use high speed cutting discs at that point. And I've got eye protection, and I've got a mask, and I've got leather gloves on, and hot sparks are flying, and black dust is going everywhere, and everything becomes oxide. And eventually I get through it, and then I follow it up with a deburring thing on the Dremel, so that no one slices their pretty little fingers open when I'm done. And then I cuss Marshall for being so stupid in the first place. I do that about 47 times during the process, but that's how I do it. Now, I'm not saying that you should do it that way. And I don't think I mentioned that I use C-clamps to hold everything rigid, so that chassis cannot fly off. And about the only thing I have to worry about is when not if, but when one of the cutting discs on the Dremel breaks, that I've got my glasses and my hands, so it's not going to take out my eye or cut my finger to the bone. So, I mean, it's not safe, but it's doable, and it can be made much more safe. I would expect to go through about $10 worth of cutting discs, typically. There are probably other ways to do it with this. How I do it with the tools that I already own. Let's see. Randomly selected user has not been babbling enough. We need to have more babble. I'm supposed to do things like check and see how many people are looking at this at one time. Let me do that. I just got in trouble with my buddy Keith about not knowing what my stats are. So let's look at my stats. Where did I get my stats? No. Is it under edit? Analytics? Do I have any live analytics? I've got 663 views. No, that can't be right. Yeah, wait, that's first 2 hours and 58 minutes. I haven't been doing this for 2 hours and 58 minutes. I've been doing it for 1 hour and 40 minutes. I don't know what that means. 234 watch hours already? I don't know what this means. Average view duration, 21 minutes. Watch time, 234 hours. That's a lot of people watching 20 minutes. You know what? It's easy to get caught up in all this stuff. I'm not going to get caught up in that. Let me close that. That's a distraction. That doesn't matter. I take what I do with the work for the clients very seriously, and I take how I communicate all that stuff to you guys very seriously, but all this stuff about being on YouTube and all that, you can't take that seriously at all. And I can't think about numbers and all that because what goes up must come down at some point. So any advice on where to learn to really learn to be an app tech? I don't know. I fell into this by accident. The way I did it is not any way that I could recommend anyone do. And electronics courses today, pretty much the first 2 semesters will teach everything you need to know about the electronics aspect of working on apps. The rest of it is stuff that they don't actually teach in electronics school today, or they don't stress enough, like, hey, that all the stuff you just learned last semester that applies to low-level, small signal stuff. Now we're going to talk about things that are carrying some serious current with some serious heat, with some serious weight, and the rules change because I see so many PCBs designed by people who are trained on how to build a telephone or something, and then it just doesn't hold up. I think I just heard someone knock on the door. Let me double check and see if that's that client I was waiting for. It was the dog scratching herself. Thump, 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 thump. Anyway, so I don't know if there's any set of books, et cetera, that specifically will train you to do this. You need to have the easiest way to do this would be to take maybe 2 community college classes on basic electronics, and then get a whole bunch of books like the Jack Dar books, the books that valvewizard.co.uk sells, Merlin Blinko, and then the old RCA and Western Electric manuals and stuff. And then just to try it, build some app kits for yourself and see if it all starts to make sense for yourself. But there's a lot more to an actual amp than there is to most consumer electronics. That said, the stuff in a phone, the stuff that they're really teaching these days in school, is at a much higher, much more complicated level than what we're doing with guitar amps. It's just a matter of the implications of the circuits are very different, if that makes sense. Let's see here. I'm going to be doing one deluxe reverb style, but it's not a model. I'm going to be building one. I'll make it for sale. But I don't have any intent of doing a Princeton reverb or deluxe reverb build, let alone a model. The world's got that if you want a Fender copy, there's other people making Fender copies. I want to make amps that don't exist. I mentioned earlier, people, lose small fortunes making things that sound different than what people want. I want to lose what little fortune I ever have. I'm a long way from having the fortune first, but once I have it, I'm gonna lose it. Oh yes, I will. I will lose it. It'll sound awesome, and about 7 people will know that. Tom, there's a question. Use 22 gauge or 20 gauge for filament wiring. It depends on what tubes they are, how many of them. You need to know what the current draw of each tube is. So if I had, say, 3 12VX7s and 2 6V6s, I'd run 20 gauge, 6V6 to 6V6. Then I could use 22 gauge from the second 6V6 to all 3 12VX7s. If I had an amp with 4 EL34s and 6 12VX7s, I'd probably run 18 gauge for the, did I say 84? I meant to say EL34s. I'd use 18 gauge for the 4 EL34s. Then I might run 20 gauge from there to the phase inverter and maybe one more tube. And then the next ones would get 22 gauge. You probably get 22 gauge for all those novels in that scenario. But basically, this thing's going to draw 300 milliamps, and I got 7 of those. I need a total capacity of 2.1 amps. Well, then I've got 4 amps, being taken up by these power tubes versus 1.5 amps versus these, and you look at what each wire diameter is rated for, blah, 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 blah. So it's not like 12X7s are 22 gauge and EL84s or 20 or anything. But at the same time, it kind of is that once you look up the charts. Hey, Martin, on your small practice amp, it pops when you switch it on and off. Do I just solder a cap across it? I don't know what your small practice amp is. Odds are, though, it's probably not going to hurt anything if it pops, unless it's really, really loud. But put in the chat here what it is, and maybe I can give you some better advice than probably okay. Aluminum chassis are so much easier. Aluminum chassis you can almost treat like wood. You can almost route it just like wood. You can, actually, if you have a good enough router and it's clamped and all that fun stuff. But not so much steel. Not twice. Any general thoughts on using resistive cap inductor fake speaker circuits as a reactive load on? Oh, yeah. Too much goes wrong or can go wrong. I wouldn't mess with it. There are already so many good third-party reactive loads. I wouldn't want to have that inside the amp anyway because of heat issues. I'd want to have my reactive loads outside in the free air. And I'd want to be able to, if I had a reactive load, I'd want to be able to use it with more than 1 amp. Good reactive loads, $400 and up. Why limit that just 1 amp in your collection? So there's a time to know when, hey, everything that needs to be inside the amp is inside the amp, and everything else can be outside it. And that can go for effects loops too, and all kinds of stuff, reverbs and tremolos and all that stuff. Hey, John Pardo. You asked about the stuff last time. Well, I think given the choices of those vintage Marshalls or the HRDX, you probably made the only choice with HRDX. I have not been inside one myself yet, as I mentioned, but I have seen pictures and they look very promising. And it's weird to me how PRS amps are either very, very good or very, very terrible. And I never know why the disparity. Paul, we'll talk. I say that jokingly. I actually could call a couple of the people associated with that, but I get busy, and everyone has their individual list of bridges, and they know where the matches are, but they're not necessarily in a rush to introduce them to each other. CK1, you got an AC50, clean channels, quite noisy, then sounded muffled. All of a sudden while playing, now it just sounds muffled. Any thoughts, suggestions as to cause? Well, CK1, I don't know if you mean a vintage AC50 or one of the custom classic AC50s from 20 years ago. In general, either way, the first thing I would do is try different preamp tubes and see if you have a preamp tube that has gone south. That is 90% of the time, the problem with any tube amp or valve amp, depending on where you live, is the tube or the valve, not the amp. Man, Bozza the Great. I don't trust Harbor Freight anything. I have tried buying things from Harbor Freight, and they have really, really just pot metal, flimsy pieces of garbage, rattly nonsense. It's only $9. Well, it was worth $7. It was worth $2. Wasted $7 on that. So hopefully you got the only good thing that Harbor Freight has ever made, but I will never find out because they will not get another overpriced dime from me. Hey, Neil Stevenson. Bella is almost a lab. She looks like a black lab. She's got something else in her. We're not sure. Might be pointer, given her coat, but she's mostly got a lab temperament. She's very, very smart. She knows she's not allowed to come into this room, so she rarely makes an appearance on the channel. Back when I used to do videos in the living room more often, she made the occasional appearance, but she knows she is not supposed to come in here, so she just doesn't. Nikki and I named her Bella on the way home from getting her. She's a rescue dog that we got from the Humane Society in Searcy, Arkansas, and we had about an hour and a half drive back, and we were listening to music like we do, and Italian Plastic by Crowded House came on, and so she's our Bella Bambina Aha, and if you're a Crowded House fan, you know exactly why that's a perfect name for her. And then right after she learned that her name was Bella, we realized that Bella is like the #1 female dog name in the world right now, and most people are talking about freaking Twilight. And I saw one of the Twilights in the theater. My daughter was the right age. She wanted to go see it. I took her to see it. I think it was the second one. I can't tell them apart. And it was like the world's most expensive bad high school play. It was so painful to sit there. It was so bad. So I never would have named her Bella if I had known of that connection. But she is our Bella Bambina Aha, and she's a very good girl. Let's see, where was I? Why do solid-state amps lack the warmth of a tube amplifier? Transistors sound nice in effects pedal. It's not that they lack the warmth. It's that solid-state clips in an unpleasant way, and tubes clip in ways that we find musically pleasing. And there are two things here which get conflated. A solid-state amp, in terms of a power amp, in terms of the output, you don't want it to ever clip. If it clips, it sounds bad. But you can have a solid-state amp which has a preamp circuit designed to clip in pleasing ways. That's a lot of what modeling amps do, and you can do that with analog as well. It's not like it's hard and fast. Tubes are good, solid-state is bad. It's that traditionally solid-state amps were designed solely to be clean, and once they reached the point where they could not be clean anymore, then they would be unpleasant. Whereas tube amps, they hit their max clean much earlier than you think, and before they actually sound distorted, we still hear them as clean, but they're really interesting sounding because it's a nonlinear response with different harmonic distortions and stuff. Distortion is not always Megadeth. And now we have all these amps, check out like a Boss Blues Cube. That thing has a solid-state power section and a solid-state preamp section, but it is designed to sound and feel very tube-like, and a lot of players love it, and it really does sound very good. Does it sound the same to me as a tube amp? No, but neither does it sound like an old crate solid-state amp, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not a hard, fast choice anymore. I don't know if I trust 24 gauge, and I'll tell you why good at guitars. Electronically, there's nothing wrong with it, but in terms of structural strength, I I've certainly found a lot of 26 and 28 gauge stuff that just snaps off because someone looked at it too hard. But 24, I don't know. There's not much of a size difference between it and 22, so it might be just fine. But 22, I know, is going to have a stronger center conductor for just mechanical strength. I will not be taking any orders before the holidays, Sergeant Grinch. Eventually, I shall be taking orders, but I will make those announcements. Oh man, RJ Electric, I don't keep up with drive circuits. I think most of them are garbage. Tube Screamer, Blues Breaker, Klon. Blues Breaker, I'm not a big fan of. Klon, I really don't care for. It's real mid-rangey. Of those three, I'd take a Tube Screamer. Back in the day, I'd say just get a ODR, but those things are crazy expensive now. There's so many good overdrive pedals out there in the world, and then so many bad ones. And most people just choose by the color or what someone else uses. Play as many as you can, see what you think. I've got a couple of overdrive reviews up on the channel, and I played things that people really like the Archer pedal, and I thought, it's all right. It's okay. I've nothing worth spending the money on. And it depends on what you want to do, but you can get a good player with a deluxe reverb and a blues driver will sound good to the listener. It may not be what the player heard in their head, may not ever get them what they're trying to get, but to the listener, it's going to sound pretty damn great. So try a bunch, and don't think a $300 pedal is going to sound better than a $50 pedal. They're all going to sound different. Yeah, Jatuka, all the gauges are weird, but that's because you guys don't have shotguns. Hey, Adam, the bias pot on his orange Thunderbird 200 maxed out at 21 milliamp bias current for the 6550s. That seems low. Cold bias necessarily bad things with regard. That's a really deep subject. And a bias number, if I don't know the B plus or the DCR of your transformers, that number means nothing by itself. That's like looking at a painting and without ever seeing the painting and saying, does it have enough orange? Well, I don't know. I don't know how much green or blue or brown or purple it has. So I don't know. And I'm not making fun of you, but you've got one number out of several that are important. 21 seems low for 6550s in general. I don't know that it specifically is. I don't think of bias as far as, it needs to be 27 milliamps. I think in terms of the ratio of the tube. Let me call it my biasing spreadsheet real quick. Maybe I'll even share it with you guys. Let's see. Let's see if I want to. Let's see. I'm not going to share all of it. Let me show you what I will share with you. All right. Almost ready for you. Assuming that it shows you only what I want you to see. Let's see. Show numbers. All right. So you're looking at numbers, and I'm looking at numbers. All right, groovy. All right, so up here I got a tube wattage, 30. This is for a 6L6. I've got push and pull, or pull and push. That just tells me which side to look at. It's not even necessarily which one's pulling or pushing. It just tells me which. When I have a pair of tubes, it helps me identify it. Tube number 1 means that this is a 50 watt or 45 watt. This was actually from a super reverb. If it was a twin, that would say 2 there. Then I've got a primary resistance. That's the DCR measured from primary to center tap of the amp. And if the amp is powering on safely, I let it run for about 15 minutes and power it off, and then I measure that. So I like to get a warm measurement on the primary resistance. Then I go and I make sure the mains are set. There's 120 volts coming out of the wall at that moment. I might have had to use the variac for that. All right, I'll power it on. I take it out of standby. This is already after the light bulb limiter, and I know that everything's safe. And I measure the bias voltage. It was negative 47.6. Notice it says negative voltage above that, so I don't have to type in the negative when I do this. And then I type in the plate voltage, 472. Then under E, I type in the measurement I get across from the primary to the center tap on the output transformer. And I got 1.88 and 2.36. And I've got 50, 60, 70% there, so that I once I put in the primary and I put in the plate voltage, I know what I want to see. So see, like 50% is 1.54. If I go in the amp and I measure 1.3, I know that I don't need to even worry about taking a measurement. I'll just make sure that both tubes are kind of about the same, because I need to make the bias warmer. But 1.88 and 2.36 with plate voltage of 472 means that I've got 61.1% dissipation and 70.6% dissipation. One's dissipating 18.33 watts, the other one's dissipating 21.18 watts. One is drawing 38.8 milliamps, the other one's drawing 44.9 milliamps. Those were not well matched. And different amp here. No, not a different amp, different bias setup. Lowered the bias to 39.4, and the plate voltage dropped to 403. And you can see here that the bias went crazy, 82.7 and 77.1. One of those tubes was not good. And that's where I stopped with that amp. And then a more typical one would be down here for this next one, which is another set. I think this was a different super reverb. You can see the plate voltage with the bias 47.5 on the bias, 453 on the plate, 61.4 and 60.8 on the bias. Then it went down to negative 43.7. What was changing? Why is the bias different? Huh. Anyway, sorry, it's hard to do this after the fact. Anyway, I'm tracking the percentage of the tube. So 17.8 watts on a 30-watt tube is 56.9. 16.92 of a 30-watt tube is 56.4. And incidentally, the milliamps were 40 and 39, and these were biased. That was a good bias for that amp. And then I've got down here, you can see I've got 25 watts, 2 tubes per side. That would be a 100-watt Marshall. So it started off at 13.5%. That's really cold. Got it down to 53.7, up to 53.7, 54%. That's cool, but not cold. Anyway, that's enough of that. So those are my spreadsheets, and it does a lot of the math for me. I've already set all that stuff up with pi and all that fun stuff. Let's see. When we get back, we'll talk Variac with Vil S, and Matt Fields is saying there's a big quality improvement at Harbor Freight in the last 5 years. So maybe I need to revisit that. But man, that stuff was just made of junk. Anyway, it's possible that they got better. Take another 7. Cut myself off. We're going to do another 7-minute intermission. Everyone get a Coke, get a sandwich, do what you need to do. See you back in just a few. 28 seconds behind. Oops. You take that off. Let's see where we're critical specs. Number one is just the current capability. So for most amps, you want a 5 amp capability. If you're going to be doing SVTs or multiple amps at once, probably 10 amps. A good Variac is very expensive, but you can get an adequate one, typically for about $100 these days, a little bit more for a 10 amp. Just make sure that you calibrate the knob so that when 120 volts are coming out of the wall and 120 volts are coming out of it, the knob is set to 120. And to do that, you loosen the set screw and turn the knob until it lines up with 120. Then you tighten it, you confirm it, and then you can kind of use it at that point. But, you always want to verify with a meter. A really great one would have a meter as well, but most of us just stick one somewhere in the chain. Natas, this is the third time you've asked and the third time I've answered. I put at the very beginning, even before the chat started, a link to my buddy Lane Sparber. He's a great tech. He's in Queens. He's on Instagram, Lane Sparber Amp Tech. And that's all I can do for you is tell you a third time. I tell you 3 times. That was a non-specific weird accent. So if I've offended anyone, I've offended huge swaths of people, but no one specifically. Let's see, people talking about China and stuff. What's the average cost to do the reliability upgrades to the newer Hot Rod Deluxe and our good amps to make them good amps? About $350. Labor and parts, that's top end. That's, $250 to $350. Favorite overdrive pedal is the J-Rocket Dude V2. I tried the Dude V1. I thought it was a little bit too much of a tube screamer. I think that I like their Majestic better, but I didn't dislike the Dude. It just was a very tube screamer MIDI thing to me. I didn't care for the Archer. It turns out I don't like the sound of the Klon. I do like the Prince of Tone, the King of Tone, if you can get one. I like the Timmy, ODR1. I like a Rat. Call me weird. A Rat pedal can be, sometimes that's the right choice. I'm not a snob about such things. Wampler makes good stuff, man. Wampler and Barber both make good stuff. And Barber, I think, gets slept on a little bit in the industry because he doesn't have crazy vivid colors and crazy stuff. Faramir and Unicorn. Nice, good. You're a good guy. I got hence the name. You can't wait to order an amp. I guess I'll get a J.K. Lee. Well, that's an extreme thing from one of my amps to a J.K. Lee. But hey, if those are the sounds that you're looking for, Dave's already got that made for you, and it'll be a good one. I wouldn't make something equivalent to a J.K. Lee because that amp already exists. Yeah, Jatuka is approaching the Variac from the different aspects. And I was looking at just what the fuse rating is, and they're looking at he's looking at the VA thing. It ends up the 2 different ways of looking at the same thing, but we're saying the same thing. Let's see. Is there a way to implement Class D modules with an eye towards long-term reliability and service, or is the fate always e-waste? I don't know. I would think that it has to be possible to make a Class D amp that will work. It's just that no one seems to be choosing to do so. Everyone's using the fairly disposable ICE modules. And I say fairly disposable. They're not disposable, they're not recyclable. They're going to be landfill filler. But it is that a lot of that is people trying to put all this stuff in a very small size. So you have all this stuff jammed together. If you made it twice as big with space and airflow and heat management, thermal management, it would be larger. It would take up more space. It would weigh more. It would cost a little bit more to make. It would probably also last a lot longer. So, yeah, I mean, there are more things that can go wrong with Class D, but there's no reason it has to. It just seems to, because people always want to have everything crammed together, and heat is the enemy of all these things. Yeah, I saw the Ask Zach video, Chris McKinney, and in fact, I mentioned that at the beginning of the chat. Good comparison. Hey, Natas, it's no problem, man. You're always in my good book. I was just giving you a little bit of shit. That was a good video, and I was glad, like I said earlier, that Zach and all those pros agreed with me. I see a Biambule. Of course, I say that after he's already long gone. So you guys get to experience this more in real time than I do. I'm always playing catch up. Let's see. Sorry, I'm drinking coffee on mic. How dare I enjoy a nice beverage near a microphone? Let's see, people talking about old tools and cheap tools. Hackos. Yeah, Hackos are just so much nicer than Wellers. And Wellers are quite good. Let's see. Hey, Canal de Cenas. Is it Cenas? Portuguese is difficult because it's almost in my brain. I studied Spanish in high school, so I go to that, but then I was from Lisbon, Portugal. I had a lovely time in Lisbon. I'd love to come back. It is a beautiful place. I understand that every other tourist in the world has that same idea, and that's not making Lisbon so much fun for you guys. But Lisboa. I love your videos. Thank you very much. Obrigado. I have an Ignitor Tweaker 15. It has 3 valves in the preamp. What is the function of each of them? When changing one, should I always change the others? Thanks. The first one is going to be doing the most of the amplification. The tweaker is very similar in topology to a Marshall or Fender. So the first one is taking the incoming signal and bringing it up to a higher level, and then it's going through, I believe in the tweaker, then it goes through a volume, which, taking the output of the first tube stage, so the signal has been brought up, and then controlling how much of that is fed to the subsequent stages. This next stage adds more gain, and that's when you begin to get overdrive introduced. And then you have one which, and then it drives the tone stack, and then it goes to the phase inverter, and that splits the signal to each side of the output section. That's a very broad overview. But if you change one, you don't have to change the others. They're not going to wear out it's not like getting your oil changed in the car where every 6 months you need to change things. One of them may last 20 years, the other one may last 2 weeks. You never really know. But in general, unless a preamp tube is noisy, it does not need to be replaced. So say you needed to replace V2 because it became microphonic, you can leave V1 and V3 alone. I hope that helps. Your backdrop looks pretty cool, and it's nice to see everything lit up. Thank you. Well, it's not a backdrop. It's just the room behind me. There are channels that use green screen and backdrops and all that. I am not one of them. Hey, it's bright. But I appreciate that. You don't see the cardboard on the floor over here. No, I'm smart. Yeah. Not a green screen. This is an actual Marshall. Thank you, sent to me. That's 2 in the same chat from you, man. Unless you're really rich, you don't need to send me super chats for every question. If you are really rich, you need to increase the amount. Me again. I just placed the 3-watt resistor between pins 4 and 6. I just moved where the resistors were on the board with bus wires. That'd be fine. You can use the individual orange wires from the board to pins 6 and then resistors and then just have jumpers. That's fine. It's just a lot more work because then you have all to add jumper wires and all those things, and then you have all those orange wires that you've got to move from pin 4 to pin 6 on each tube socket. With mine, I'm just running one wire from the board to one screen and then jumpering from screen to screen to screen. Both are electronically exactly the same. You just made your work a little bit harder because you're having to do more on the PCB. Thank you very much for the super chat. Just Dave's got himself a FX 888DX. That's a very nice one to have, and it is a huge increase in quality over a pencil, certainly. But even against the Weller temperature-controlled stations, at least the ones that I've tried, Weller probably has some newer, higher-end ones that I've not tried, but of the Wellers that I have tried versus the Hackos in the same price range, the Hackos have just killed the Wellers. Have I any experience with the Hoffman turret board for the Fender Blues Junior? Sadadki asks. I was thinking of finding a cheap rec amp to do a conversion on for a project. I have not. You would give up on the reverb if you do that, and you would have to do some drilling to get real pots in there because the holes are not the right size, I believe, on the top for real pots. And I'm not sure if Hoffman makes a replacement output board that lets you use real tube sockets because the holes in the chassis are oversized for octal sockets, so you have to have the recessed board-mounted ones. It seems to me that if you're going to all that trouble, you might as well just buy a different amp and make your own thing. And Hoffman's got all kinds of boards. You don't have to go with that. Or you can use one of his Blues Junior boards, but rather than go to all these links to make the Blues Junior chassis work, and the cabinet sounds pretty boxy, I would go with any number of existing chassis you can get for like $60 that'll fit into existing cabinets, many of which will sound better than a Blues Junior. I'd rather have a deluxe reverb cabinet than a Blues Junior cabinet. The internal volume of the cabinet does matter. So for those, for many reasons, I have not tried that, so I have no experience with it. I know Doug Hoffman makes good quality stuff. If you were to be happy with that amplifier, you'd be very happy with the Hoffman board for it. It's just not something that I would chase myself. And again, we have caught up to the end of the chat. I don't know what's going wrong. Have I let people down? Or is everyone out there watching my how to make a video, which was a real push me, pull you kind of thing to make, because I was making that video about how I make videos while also making the video on that 68 Twin, and the order in which to approach things got tricky. I knew when I put that up this morning that a relatively small number of people would watch that video. But I also knew that it's kind of like a postcard to younger me. If I had found that video when I was starting this process, my God, I could have just leapfrogged over so many mistakes that I've personally made getting to this point. So for anyone out there in my position trying to make YouTube videos, it doesn't have to be about amps, but just whatever, to say, no, hey, skip this, this is how you do it, and this is how it's done. And, just because I have not seen any beginner, intermediate level things on this. I've seen real beginner stuff that are like, hey, all you need is this and this and this. You can do it all from your phone. It's not true. And I've seen lots and lots of advanced stuff, but getting from point A to point Z is the trick. So I was doing stuff around element OP. Today's video for me was the element OP level of video production. So I hope that helps people. And I'm really just talking long enough to give you guys time to ask more questions. Let's see. All right. My YBA1 does not have a secondary for bias voltage. Uses capacitor couples bias circuit to create it. I'm a bit apprehensive about that style of bias control. Am I worried over nothing? It depends. They do that in a JCM 900, and it works just fine, but that is one of the most common things that goes wrong with a JCM 900. Now, before I scare you entirely, know this. There are different kinds of capacitors used for AC voltages. And what you want to have in this case is an X-class capacitor, which is rated for the entire primary voltage of your amp. Entire secondary voltage, of your HT supply in your amp. And the reason you need to have it really high is because if that thing goes into standby or the center tap disconnects, you're going to have like 700 volts. And so you cannot have an orange drop or equivalent, 240, 300 volt, 400 volt cap on there. You've got to have a cap that can really handle that high AC voltage. So it is possible to do a good capacitive coupled bias circuit. And if you look at last month, I had a high watt DR104 or 103, I don't remember, in where I had done a bias mod, and there's a little PCB mounted over one of the unused preamp sockets using the two holes that were already in the chassis for mounting a preamp socket, so there's no permanent change to the amp. And I did exactly a capacitor coupled bias circuit because the stock circuit in the amp did not get negative enough. Tubes would have been too hot. And you can see a great big gray box cap on my board, and that's an X-class rated capacitor, not an orange drop. So look into this. Don't take this little 2-minute thing and then say, now I know what to do. Say, all right, he gave me all the clues. Let me go research what's an X-class cap and how do I choose a capacitor for AC. And it can be like the difference between a $2 cap and a $4 cap. It's not going to break the bank. For some reason, all the text on the screen is swimming. One of the problems with doing this is that I've got this great big beautiful studio light here, and I'm looking at white text on a black background, and if I forget and I look at the light and I come back, it's like being snowblind or something. I don't even have it on that bright. It's like at 30%. Might be a little bit less than that. If I turn this up, you would know my hair would blind you all. Do I order soldering tips direct from Hacko or do I use a supplier? I believe I get them from DigiKey. I've only ordered one replacement tip. I'm pretty sure I got it from DigiKey, but it might have been Mauser. I tend not to order things from manufacturers directly unless it's the only option. But I think I just did Hacko tip, and there is direct links to the factory. Then there was a DigiKey or Mauser one. Then there was a whole bunch of Amazon, and the Amazon ones, some of them were Hacko, some of them were Fitz Hacko, and especially with the one I've got where it's got all these sensors. I didn't want something that fits Hacko. I wanted it to be Hacko. My thoughts on topside repairs on a PCB to save taking out the board. Well, that is a really good question, Martin. Like I've got that. Got this Supro I did the video on the other day. And I've got R4 here, which is toasty. And I probably could replace that from the top, but unless I get in there with my little dental mirror and look under the board, I won't know. Because if the leads, this is going to be graphic for some of you, sorry, get your minds out of the gutter. If the leads are going into the PCB like this, and they're straight down and there's just solder, then I can heat that up and I can pull the resistor out. I can get the old solder off and I can replace that resistor from the top. But if we're going to go in again, if the resistor leads go through there and then are bent over like this, let's see if you can see it. So there's a hook there, and I try to pull them up from the top. Because the top solder will heat up before the bottom solder, and I do that and I pull that resistor up, it can very easily rip the bottom pad. And unless I can see that, I won't know whether it's safe to replace that from the top. So it's not a matter of whether it's good or bad or safe or not to do it from the top. It's going to vary depending on whether that resistor lead is bent over on the bottom or straight down. If it's straight through, yeah, I can pull that out. Just do all that work from the top. That's asking for trouble. That's where I've got to get to the bottom of the board. But this cap here, which is bulging, which you can't see. So everything's left, right, backwards to me. Right there. That, to do that properly, I have to pull this PCB out. And to do that, I've got to take all the stuff off the back panel off and all the stuff off the front panel and pull this board out and then get this board flipped up and make sure that I'm not messing up all the wiring harness or anything getting stressed or broken. And I've got to undo and redo a bunch of wire snips because I don't want to void a warranty. But if this were like a 10-year-old amp and the only thing wrong with it was this one bulging electrolytic, let me put it down to the side. What I have learned I could do to save, if that were a 10-year-old amp, that was the only thing wrong with it, to save the owner a big expense, is I could move that cap back and forth until it breaks off, by which I mean that the leads would be left in the board but had broken off from the capacitor. At that point, I could pull or push the leads out, the old leads through the board out, remove that solder, and then attach a new capacitor from the top and then bend it over on the side so the leads are exposed. And I've done that for old amps where I want to repair a top side radio like that without having a big proper repair bill for the owner. So you make a judgment call. If you can do it from the top without damaging anything, go for it. Much lower repair bill. My favorite PCB designs out there, almost everything is serviceable from the top, or the board is designed to be accessed without taking the entire thing apart, or some combination thereof. Sent to me, man. If you're on Social Security, I appreciate you being here. You don't need to do all these super chats. Just come on here and ask the questions. I appreciate it, but man, especially if you're on Social Security, I don't need your money that bad. I mean, I'm a terrible salesman, by the way. These chats are not a money-making venture for me. I appreciate any super chat that comes in, but please do not feel pressured to do one. That's not why I do it. Just a way that I know that some guys out there really like this stuff and they feel like giving it. And so if people want to give it, I'll take it, but only if you have it to give. Hey, Edward Trankner. I'm building a Mojo Tone NC 1530. Okay, it's a 15-watt AC30. After watching my channel and other channels, I built a few guitars and pedals. Thought this would be fun. Only working on it when I focus only on it. That is the best way to do it, especially with a tube amp. It's not like, I put this together and the tone knob doesn't work like on a guitar, or the drive works backwards on a pedal. Those are inconvenient, but they won't electrocute you. So with an amplifier, you really want to get all your T's dotted and your I's crossed. Thanks, Robbie F. Convince him not to do YouTube videos. Well, that's only if you want to do them well. You can just take your iPhone and film stuff and just upload it and say, hey, this is what I did today. And if you're Tom Bukovac, that works. Though some of his colors are terrible. If he does it, it's a kind of orange, weird looking image of a guy playing guitar at a superhuman level. If I do it, it's an orange, weird looking video of a guy holding a guitar and occasionally making noises with it. And there's a big difference there. So I've got to supplement my lack of guitar and musical talent with having fantastic lighting. Mwahaha. I think somewhere in between is where I'm really at. I don't play like Tom, and I don't look like I don't think Ridley Scott's gonna be calling me anytime to do his lighting. So, but I enjoy what I do on both sides of things. I don't have any thoughts on a Bugera V55 HD. I avoid all Bugeras. The ones that have come in I have opened up as favors for people seeing big charred messes where the output tube socket boards used to be, and I've given them back and said, no, I'm sorry, it's already, the ghost is gone. There's no putting it back. Bugera stuff is really poorly made and not. There are many better things to throw your money away on than Bugera amps. Thank you, DIJ83544. Man, some of you guys need to come up with pronounceable screen names. First of all, DIJ is really hard to see. Is that DLJ, DIJ? And then just a random string of numbers. It's hard to... Hey, there's a Ted, there's a Void Burner, there's a Randy, there's a DMAC, there's a Gooden. Well, aside from Void Burner, that's just weird. But, it's so much easier if I can just say the thing. So, DIJ, what is your name, dude? And I'll try to remember it so I can call you that. If not, I'll just call you Stan. Let's see. What is the most important advice I would give to an absolute beginner that is interested in modifying their tube amps or servicing their amps? Well, this is going to sound like it's a deflection, but seriously, learn on pedals. Learn on speaker cables. Get your soldering techniques down really well when the stakes are low. Learn how circuits work with low voltage. A 9-volt battery might make your tongue tingle a little bit. That's it. So if you make a mistake in a 9-volt battery, you might make a cap crap the bed and you get a little whiff of bad smoke, but it's a survivable thing. It's not an utter tragedy. And then once you get to the point where you can build any pedal you try to build and have it work the first time, and have it work no matter if you shake it and tug on the wires and everything in there is solid, and then you can do 9 more just like that, and your guitar that you wired up hasn't cut out on 30 gigs, and every cable that you made has still been working for 6 months, build a tube champ kit. Go get a Fender champ kit. Build that. Work slowly. Make sure you understand everything that you're seeing. And by which I mean, there are a lot of guys out there playing connect the dots with amp kits where, hey, the picture shows that this wire is connected here, this thingy here, and then goes to this what's it over here. Get thingy and what's it out of your head. Think this is the grid of the second gain stage, and it is being connected to the wiper of the volume pot, which is being fed by the output of the first gain stage through this coupling cap. So a coupling cap, and then a pot to ground, and the wiper is feeding the next stage. And this resistor in doohickey, that's the cathode resistor for V2A, and that's the bypass cap across it. And here's the plate resistor for it. So you can see what you're seeing. And believe it or not, working on pedals is a great way to learn how to work on tubes, because at its core, a transistor works the same way a triode works. You're going to have an emitter, a gate, a base, all these things are common, depending on the transistor type. And then you can get into op amps with different, whether it's a negative feedback loop, inverting, non-inverting, all these things. All that's great training for actually working on tubes, but you can make your mistakes at 9 volts as opposed to making a mistake at 450 volts, because the consequences of a mistake at 450 volts can be life-changing or life-ending. And certainly, not to be hyperbolic, but very expensive. So there you go. That's where I'd say. And once you get to the point where you built that champ and it works and you had no problems and you like it, build a deluxe reverb, build a Tweed Deluxe, and then do Marshall builds, and then see where the wind takes you at that point, because you'll have a knack. Or you'll say, man, I tried it, but it just always goes bzzz, so that's not for me. Hey, Sadaki, how have the 18B plus multimeters been holding up for me? I have, I've got like 5 or 6. I have the 2 on display there. Of the original ones I bought, one died after about 2 years. So in terms of monthly rental, 2 years, that's like $1 a month. So, I would love to have 10 fluke meters, but that's $30,000, $3,000, however that math works out. It's a lot. To have 6 $20 meters is much more doable. And for really what we do with amp stuff, typically, these little $20 Thucyndes do everything that I would need a fluke to do. And I can set up multiple ones. And if I drop it, if I do something stupid, I'm out $20. That's an easy penalty. And before these, I had 2 very nice flukes, and one of them died. And I reached out to Fluke to see if I could get it serviced, and they're like, "Yeah, $300." I'm like, I probably could have fixed it myself, but I just decided, here we go. Yeah, Josh Roberts, my flute costs $550, and it's a great meter, but it costs that because it has features that don't apply. I don't need to do thermal management. I don't need to track exactly how hot something's going to get and plot that out over a graph. If I needed to, I'd get an app on my phone, for that kind of thing. But for measuring voltage, current, AC and DC, and capacitance, and measuring diodes, and doing continuity checks, which is the majority of what I do with those things, they do it all exactly the same as a fluke. These are things that are very traditional, very simple to do. And so, I've got a red one, and I've got a black one, and I've got some more black ones. I'd love to have nothing but red ones, just to have red meters. But, what vintage Fender amps are coming up for repairs in the future? Well, I've got a whole bunch of super reverbs yet to be finished, including one from like 69 that had a charred a power transformer. And I just got in a 65 Deluxe, and I don't remember what year, 65, 66, might be 64, twin reverb. Those will be coming up on the channel soon. But I've got a lot of Marshalls to finish before I dive back into the Fenders. I've got like 4 Marshalls at the same time, and I've got 4 Marshalls and 5 super reverbs that are next in the queue. Let's see. Any thoughts on loudspeaker flyback voltages and their effects on output transformers and drive tubes? This does not show up on frequency response graphs. I don't know. I haven't looked that much into it. I have learned that with current production EL34s, it is better to have flyback diodes between plate and ground than not. And R5000s are better than R3000s, and R3000s are better than 1N or UF 4007s in series. So basically, I'm trying to keep a fault from becoming catastrophic for the entire system and doing damage in the amplifier as a whole. Sorry, I got a mystery flashing beep. I don't understand. Must have touched the wrong button. I didn't mean for this to beep at all. Anyway, so I don't keep up with, if your question's as to like how that applies to PA speakers or higher wattage things, I don't know. It's not something that I worry about too much on 6L6 or 6V6 amps, because I've just not found as many dramatic failures with those as I have with EL34s. But I certainly don't hear any difference under normal operation with or without them. But it's nice to know that if the tube fails, it's only going to take out itself. Ted C says, I can't hear the difference between half watt and full watt on his Orange Rocker 32 stereo amp. You'd hear the difference more if the master volume were on high, assuming that the switch is working. It's possible the switch isn't working, but people are often surprised when they realize how little a volume difference there is between 15 watts and 30 watts or 7 watts and 15 watts. You'd have to have the master high to really hear the difference. If you have the master low, it's going to be a little more marginal. Yeah, Josh Robert, fluke meters are really tough. And if I was a lineman, if I was up on a pole all day or doing electrical installs in construction, where I show up on a job site and I've got to wire all these things before the drywall or insulation come in. With those environments with the dust and the dropping and rain and all that, yeah, flukes are absolutely worth it. It very rarely rains in my workshop. We don't have too many dust storms. People are unlikely to drop a bag of Quickset on them, So this is a pretty nice life for a meter to have here. Is there a way to get the board non-conductive? Wolfgang Krauss, I have a video up just the other day on a 68 twin reverb where I show how I do that. I only show it in one section, one area, but that's how I do it across the entire thing. So it takes a while to get it out, and sometimes I will fully soak the old fiberboard in 100% isopropyl alcohol and then drive it all out with a heat gun. But usually the more spot method that I show in the video from the other day does the trick. Take a look at that. If it works, all it takes is time, a soldering iron, a hair dryer, and about $5 worth of 91% isopropyl alcohol from the drugstore. Oh, and common sense. Don't put the alcohol in and start touching things, and if there's any voltage in the amp. I always forget to tell people, by the way, don't kill yourself. But apparently it's very important to tell people in every video, don't electrocute yourself. Hey, Floridian. I have not spoken to the Supra owner. First of all, I expected him to be here today. Second of all, I've been really busy the past couple of days, and I figured I'd call him on Monday, and so we could reach out to Supra's distributor if necessary with the serial number. I don't know how long he's had the amp. It looks practically brand new. I don't know whether it's in warranty or not. If it's in warranty, we'll get all that taken care of for him. If it's out of warranty, I know how to fix it. I meant to check if I can get the schematic for that. Let me do that while I'm thinking about it. I have a super secret way to get schematics. I am a member of a secret amp tech society, and we share cool things with each other. Let's see if I have access to that on our FTP site. No, I don't want to install a new version of that. Thank you. Let's see if we have any luck. All right, schematics. And on mine, let me go back. Just amps in general. Actually, no, I've got a thing for Supra. Let me go down to rare amps. Where's my Supros at? I can do this a lot faster if I'm not doing this as well, but all right. Make sure I don't already have it, first of all. No, I've got a bunch of them already, but I don't have that one. Let's see if the Supro 1605 is up here. 1610, 1695, 765, 1696. 6420 Thunderbolt. Well, Shazbot. Looks like I already have all these. And so my secret society does not have the 1605 schematic. It's possible that one of these similar Supra models is the same thing with a different model number. Maybe it's one doesn't have reverb, maybe one does. But I doubt it. These have all been up there since July of 23. I'm gonna download them all just in case there's anything there that I don't have, because files are small. Let's see, just a second. I got to overwrite the ones I already have. Always use this action. Thank you very much. All right. So that's done. Sorry to I was just remembering that I needed to see if that schematic's up there. That's one of the problems with these little companies like Supro. It's just someone bought the name and is licensed out a design, and the visuals look like a Supro, but what's inside is not at all the right thing. And I think these things go for like $900, the 1605 with reverb, and for that price you can get a used Swart Atomic Space Tone, which besides the fact is a much better amp, is called an Atomic Space Tone. How can you not love that? I mean, it doesn't get any more George Jetson than the Atomic Space Tone. You can even get the Atomic Space Tone Junior. So I've got to look and see what's going on with the Supro. Hopefully it's warranty and I can get it out of here, but if not, I'll take care of the guy. It's just, I'd like to know why R4 toasted, and without a schematic, I'd have to trace out that part of the circuit, and don't want to spend the time. It's not that I'm lazy. It's if I spend the time on that, I got to charge the owner for that. Have any of the new Gibson amps come my way? What do I think of them at the price, other than the price point? No, and I would probably decline them because I decline all the Mesas. I don't think much of them at all, and I've only seen pictures of it, and to be marketed as hand-wired and to have all those quick connects in there, it's not a hand-wired amp. And from what I saw, the construction quality, it's not construction quality, and it seems like a pretty typical Mesa kind of thing, disguised as a Gibson. But what do I know about old amps anyway? I'm not a friggin' expert. Let's see. Hey, Adam Shaw. I'm thinking about adding either a coil split or an out-of-phase switch in my Les Paul. Are any pros or cons to either? Do I have a preference? Thanks. My preference is for neither. If I might do a phase switch, but phase switch it's one of those things you hear it and you think that's great, and then you end up rarely using it. Coil split is more useful than a phase switch, but a coil split doesn't sound as good as a single coil. What I like to do, and it doesn't work on all or as well with all humbuckers, but with most PAF style humbuckers it works really well. If you have the wiring ability, is to split it into parallel versus series. And so you end up with a sound which is much more like a traditional single coil in sound, but it's also, and this is critical, it's much more like a single coil in output, because put it this way, we're going to do real simple math. Say that a humbucker, a PF style humbucker, has got an 8K DCR. And we're going to, for the purpose of this, we're going to say that DCR by itself, the DC resistance, correlates to output level. So if a PF is an 8K DCR and therefore has an output of 8, you coil tap it, it's only going to be using one coil, it's going to have an output of 4. So half as loud. Well, a traditional single coil, Strat single coil, may have a DCR of 6. So full humbucker, output level 8. Single coil, output level 6. Split coil humbucker, output level 4. So it's a big volume drop, whereas 8, 6, not as much. It's more what you expect in humbucker and single coil. You put that humbucker in parallel mode, it's going to be closer to the output level of a 6, even though don't worry about the DCR in that case because it's in parallel. But it is very different output level, and it sounds better. And most of the time, that's my preference, is to go parallel rather than series, as opposed to coil tapping or coil splitting. There is the other thing you could do, which PRS does, where they will partially shunt one of the coils of a humbucker. So instead of having it shunt to ground, so you get down to 4K, it may shunt through a 2K resistor, so you end up back at 6K, and you have an output level drop, but not nearly as much as you do with fully shutting off a coil, and you still get some benefit of the humbucker and some benefit of the noise reduction, the same way you do get some of that with the parallel versus split. So parallel is my preferred. Secondly would be the partial split, like you get with the PRS. Last is the traditional split because they just sound anemic. Now, for some styles of music, that anemic clean sound is great. If you're doing Whitesnake covers, that's the sound, man. But try to do Stevie Ray with that sound, it's going to sound blink, 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 blink. Let's see. Hey, Captain Grumpus, do you have a preference regarding speaker size and Princeton reverb? You've got one with a 12-inch. Well, I prefer it. I prefer the 10-inch. If you're thinking of taking out the 12 and putting in a 10 with a baffle adapter, then you're doing it backwards to everyone else that takes out the 10 and puts in a new baffle with a 12. So someone will buy your baffle with a 12. That's good news. I understand why people think to put a 12 in a Princeton, but unless you increase all the dimensions of the Princeton cab, it doesn't have enough volume in that cab to really support what a 12-inch is capable of. So you're going to have still a big mid-range emphasis, and the low end is going to be kind of shelved off, even though the speaker is capable of it, because that sound cannot develop in that small boxy cab. So Princeton, to me, should have a 10-inch speaker because that's what fits in a 12 in a Princeton cab. If you want the sound of that amp with a larger speaker, that larger speaker needs to be in a larger cab. I think the deluxe reverb cabinet is just barely large enough for a 12-inch to really shine. And if they were to make the deluxe reverb 4 inches taller and 2 inches deeper, it would sound immensely better. And if I had a cabinet shop, I would prove it to you guys, but I don't. So I have heard an awful lot of cabinets, and I actually have some of my favorite dimensions written down. But all these things, there's the general, this direction is better, and then within that general direction, you've got to figure out exactly what's best, and that's where you need to build 10 of each thing, and then listen to it. Let's wind this down, because we are coming to that time where it is time to wind it down. So let me make sure. I don't have much experience with acoustic amps. Wayne Millette, sorry. I always gave the sound guy, the other end of the 1/4-inch cable, and they plugged into the DI, and I got what I got. And if it was a good monitor mix, I could use the mic. Otherwise, I was just on the B band, the piezo. Thanks, Robbie F. I say that as he's gone. Let's see. Yeah, flukes are great, but you're paying an awful lot. Now, I got to argue with the randomly selected user. I put the alcohol in, and then I put the soldering iron on it. And the ignition temperature of isopropyl is like 680 degrees Fahrenheit. I looked it up because someone was asking about this. It might have been you. And I have the temperature on the tip set to 700, but that tip doesn't, the eyelet surrounded by the fiberboard, and that fiberboard has got so much alcohol in it, it's going to cool that tip down. I'd have to have that tip at like 800 degrees before I could get a sustained temperature around 700 where I'm doing the work. But I still don't think it would catch on fire. I think I would have to have a 900 degree iron and dip it into. See, if you dip it into pure alcohol, it's going to cool the iron off. It's a push me pull you system. It's not like I'm getting the alcohol to 680 degrees and then it catches on fire. Anyway, I have not once flambéed an amp by using a 700-degree iron on an eyelet surrounded by fresh, wet alcohol. But that alcohol evaporates like that, and that's what we want. It pushes out all the water along with it. It displaces the water that was in the board because the alcohol soaks in and the water has to come out. The repair that gave me the most satisfaction, Martin, I had this last week, or a similar question last week. I think I'll stick with that. Russ Bucket Super Reverb from last year, where everyone said that thing will never work again. You can't get that to work. That's junk. Buy a new chassis. Blah blah blah. And I fixed the hell out of it. I just fixed the hell out of it. That thing was so damn good. So let's see. Yeah, Flaming Eternity. Don't build eyelet boards for pedals. My God. There's no reason to use an eyelet board to build pedals. Design a PCB if you're going to make pedals, because you can't make any money hand wiring pedals unless you charge an awful lot for it, and that's a very hard racket to get. That's a hard trick to pull off, to get someone to pay an awful lot for a hand wired pedal. There are lots of guys who start off doing that, and they tend to go by the wayside. If you have a good idea that's not just another version of an already existing pedal, design a PCB so you can make 5,000 of them, and you have less labor each, and you can charge a little bit less per, but you actually come out with a profit. There's just no reason to do an eyelet board for pedals. Sorry. If you disagree, I'm sorry. I'm the wrong guy to ask. That's just, I'm a pragmatic guy. I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for Gibson to fix Mesa. That sounds like a punchline to a joke, a setup to a punchline. Yeah, I like the tapping of PRS pickups. I just don't like the sound of the PRS pickups. But I haven't played all of them. Just the ones I have played. I've always been too bright and hard. EQ pedal, which is the best? GE10? I don't know. I don't use EQ pedals. I think if you got to use that much EQ to change the sound, something else is wrong, unless it's a real specialty thing. That said, Gilmore has always done well with the GE10s, but his are Cornish modified, and he's got individual ones with each overdrive pedal. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's a very specific use purpose. Hey, Lloyd Williams, thank you so much. Wallpaper Music doesn't think I'm correct as to how PRS does their coil splitting tapping. Well, okay, you don't have to think that, but yeah, that's how they do it. I don't remember if they use a 2K or 2.2K or whatever, but that's how they're doing the tapping on PRS. It's a partial shunt. They're not the only ones to do it. They just promote it. But yeah, and they may use a different value resistor on different models or different pickups or different things, but that's all they're doing. So if you have the top of the positive of a coil and the negative of a coil, and you tie them together, that shunts out that coil, turns it off, so that coil no longer operates. But say that coil is 4K, and you put a 4K resistor across it, all of a sudden you turn that coil down to 2K. You put a 1K resistor across it, all of a sudden it goes down like 800 ohms, because you got 4K and 1K. Just a parallel resistance thing. So you can decrease the value and hence the output of that coil in comparison to the other coil by putting a resistor in parallel to it. And that's what PRS is doing. And it's not worth arguing about. That is what they're doing. And it's one of the good ways to do it. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, sent to me. Good, and it's not worth putting a 10-inch in a champ. Just get a champ with an 8-inch speaker and make sure you change out the RCA to a 1/4 inch so you can plug in an external cab. You run into a 4x12. That's the way to do it. Hey, Merrill. I've got some groovy amps from Merrill he just dropped off too, including a 63 AC30. I forgot to mention that earlier when someone was asking me about upcoming stuff. Reeves Audio, yeah. a little bit different. You can't go from zero to that market share or for that market position. Reeves is got a head start there for various reasons. Let's see. Tighter base sounding, open back or close back cab. It's going to depend on the other factors. You'd have to have one cab designed specifically to do both. And it's always going to depend on the room it's in and where in the room it's at, and if it's on the floor or on carpet or next to a wall, and what speakers are in the cab. I don't ground. Michael Capiello. I don't remember what that Pro Junior mod was. I just don't remember. Anyway, 66 on the AC30 Merrill. Cool. Well, that's where we're going to wrap this up. I appreciate everyone being here. It means a lot to me that you come here and spend so much time on a Saturday. I hope this finds everyone well, especially everyone who might have been affected by Hurricane Helene in Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas. And we've gotten an awful lot of rain, but that's all we've gotten, so I can't complain. Anyway, everyone be well. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely week. See you next time.